Tonight's broadcast is supported in part by...
Our vote is a hard-fought right. It hasn't always been valued, and we didn't choose this system of government. But our vote creates power in Indian country. It's one way we care for our elders, defend Indigenous women and girls, protect tribal sovereignty, and fight to improve our mental health. More information about voting is available at nativesvote2022.com. Brought to you by Native Public Media and Natives Vote.
And viewers like you.
FNX news, content, programs, and more are on the web at fnx.org. Access content on the go through a phone, tablet, laptop, or on a smart TV. And thank you for watching FNX on this, your local station. FNX.org. See you soon.
From the studios of FNX First Nations Experience, Native Vote 2022 Election Night Live. Good evening. I'm Mark Trahant with ICT.
And I'm Aliyah Chavez, the anchor of the ICT newscast.
Tonight, we will take you across the country to 11 states where Indigenous candidates are running for elected office. And as we go on the air, Oklahoma voters are sending Markwayne Mullin to the U.S. Senate. He is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and the first Native person elected to that body since Ben Nighthorse Campbell in 2005. From state legislatures to the halls of Congress, we'll share stories about how this year's election affects you and your community.
We will have updates from our correspondents, plus we'll take a deep dive into issues like redistricting, ranked choice voting, and abortion rights. Our political commentators, a Democrat and a Republican, will further the conversation on some of the most important issues facing Indigenous communities.
Whether you're watching us on TV or via our partnership with FNX, listening to us on the radio through a Native Voice One affiliate, or logging into social media for our live stream, we welcome you to the 2022 Election Night Live.
Let's jump right in with what's at stake tonight. In the race for the U.S. House, all 435 seats are up for election. 49 representatives and 1 non-voting delegate have retired. Of those, 17 are seeking a different office. 1/3 of the U.S. Senate seats are up for election, plus in 36 states, 3 U.S. territories are voting for governor this election. Legislatures and tribes across the country are also voting tonight. Remember, the Senate is split 50-50 between Democrats and Republicans. So either party could be the party to control the upper house after tonight. In Kansas, Sharice Davids faces a more competitive race after redistricting changed the political makeup of her district, bringing in more conservative voters. The opposite happened in New Mexico, where a lot of Democrats were added to Republican U.S. Representative Yvette Herrell's district. We'll be watching both closely tonight. In Alaska, we'll visit the campaign watch party of Representative Mary Peltola, who won a special election earlier this year in the state's first exercise of its new ranked choice voting system. And in Oklahoma, the race for governor is expected to be a close one after all 5 of the major Oklahoma tribes endorsed a Democrat over the Republican incumbent, who also happens to be a Cherokee Nation citizen. First, we start our journey across America tonight in Newtown, North Dakota, home of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation, with Jody Rave Spotted Bear, who is at the Four Bears Casino. She joins us now via Skype. Jody, what are you seeing tonight? Hi, Jody. Can you hear us there? What are you seeing tonight there at the Four Bears Casino?
Yeah, hi. I was trying to get my video on once. Okay, okay. I'm putting the video on, but it keeps disappearing. Okay, there it is. Yeah, we're here at the Four Bears Casino here on the Fort Berthold Reservation, and we're at the watch party of Lisa DeVille Finley. And I don't know if you can see any of the people behind me right now, but they're just oh.
We hear some
Okay,
clapping
we're
there,
actually,
Jody.
yeah, we are. We're getting some election results in right now. So far, Lisa is at 82%, and her opponent, Terry Jones, is at 17%. So it's looking promising. You can hear the her supporters in the background right now.
Jody, tell us the historic nature of Lisa Finley DeVille's race and why you're watching it so closely there.
Well, if you look at the history of the Fort Berthold Reservation, Fort Berthold was created with in 1851 with the Fort Laramie Treaty. So we have a whole 171 years with no representatives from the Fort Berthold Reservation who had a seat in the state legislature.
And that, of course, could change tonight. As you just mentioned, it sounds like Lisa Finley DeVille is up pretty high. Maybe explain what the atmosphere is like, what kinds of conversations you've heard so far.
Well, they're just settling in here right now, but everybody is just anxiously awaiting these results because Lisa has been a very tireless worker in Fort Berthold. She is a member of the Fort Berthold Power, and that is an environmental group that does a lot of work on representing the rights for the people of the Fort Berthold Reservation.
And Jody, there's another Native candidate there in North Dakota tonight, someone who seems to be a very promising and rising star in the Democratic Party. Tell us about her.
Oh, yes. Ruth Buffalo is also in a very closely watched race tonight. So I talked with Ruth maybe about an hour ago, right before the polls closed, and she was still actively canvassing, working with voters, still knocking on doors and helping people get to the voting booth.
So it sounds like if Lisa Finley DeVille is elected tonight, and of course Ruth Buffalo holds on to her seat, there could be 2 Native women serving in the North Dakota state legislature. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. And we can go into more detail on that, but it's really significant that North Dakota has been shut out of the legislative process for decades. You know, we're looking at Fort Berthold Reservation. It's been here for 171 years. And if we just put that in contrast with Montana, the Montana state legislature, for example, I lived in Montana. I was a reporter for lead newspapers in Montana, and I covered the legislature there, where the Montana legislature had some of the highest representation of Native American candidates in the country. And so coming here to North Dakota has been, moving back home to where I'm from, has been very interesting because there was one person in the legislature, and that was Representative Marcellet, and I believe Marcellet is now in the Senate. But
well, Jody, we'll have to check back in with you again later. There's so much news to cover tonight. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Now to California, where Assemblymember James Ramos is seeking his 3rd term in office. California has more than 100 federally recognized tribes, yet it was only in 2018 when voters elected the very first Native American to the state's assembly. Ramos is Serrano and Cahuilla and enrolled in the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. Patty Telehungava has this profile of a man who, supporter Mario Saucedo says, is grounded in his roots.
Well, James has always been very sincere and true to everything that he has said. He's very true to always serving the community.
James Ramos says the way he was raised helps him connect with voters.
The way it does now, I grew up in a mobile home trailer. and our families, right? It was one of the most poverty-stricken areas in all of San Bernardino County. So I re-engaged in education, got my associate's degree, my bachelor's in science degree, and my master's in business administration from the University of Redlands.
Ramos spoke to voters at Chavez restaurant in Redlands, California, in the weeks leading up to the election. Helping small business owners is a part of his platform. Jose Luis Salazar is the owner of the restaurant where Ramos met with voters.
He's always talking about the support the small business, always talking about the problems in the community, and always talking about how can it be fixed, things like that.
Ramos has the backing of local labor groups and the mayors of many cities in his district. In this past term, he's served on 6 committees, including the Rules, Budget, Jobs, and Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. And he's had many bills passed in his term. He points to the Feather Alert bill as one he's especially proud of.
They can trigger a feather alert, and what that does, that's similar to the amber alert and silver alert. You'll see now license plates being flashed around all over the place, trying to make sure that those that are missing get back to their loved ones and their family.
Ramos says if he's reelected, he will continue his work on several key issues.
So the priorities moving forward are still mental health, public safety, small business. We want to make sure that there's a voice for small business owners there, as well as making sure that our fire prevention resources are something that we're getting into our community. We've been successful at getting millions of dollars into the Inland Empire region, which is one of our biggest jobs. And so we want to continue to do that and moving things forward.
And along the way, he's encouraging youth to be engaged in the political process.
For the first time last session, we had 2 bills, one that dealt with a derogatory name towards Native American women. We had Feather Alert on MMIW, and we had the California Indian Education Act, AB 1703. In each one of those, we had testimony from youth from the different tribes throughout the state of California. And we actually had testimony from youth, especially on the MMIW issue. So we're starting to engage our youth in the state of California to come up, be comfortable in testifying, and to add the support at the end of these hearings. So it's starting to take place.
Being the only Native American serving in the California Assembly resonates with some voters, like Mario Sacedo.
Well, yeah, it does make a big difference because now there's a community that is being represented that has been unrepresented or underrepresented. And so I fall in that same category. So James is a champion for all those that have not had an opportunity to be at the table of for discussion for opportunities.
Ramos agrees with that.
A great responsibility of being the only California Indian ever elected in the state legislature to pick up some of those causes and to champion bills that start to correct portrayal of the history of the state of California is a great responsibility that I take on it, and I'm honored to be able to be that voice of our ancestors.
ICT's Patty Talahongava joins us via Skype from the James Ramos Watch Party. Good evening, Patty.
Hi, Mark. We're here at the Yamava Casino and Resort, which is on the lands of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians in Highland, California. And at the watch party of James Ramos, he's hoping to win re-election. This will be his 3rd time if he wins re-election to the California State Assembly. And the candidate joins us now. So hello, Mr. Ramos, and give us an idea of what you expect with voter turnout, because today was rainy. Do you think that had an impact on the voters?
I think it had an impact on those that are coming to the precincts to vote in person. We had an aggressive campaign moving forward with several meet and greets at Chalise Restaurant, one that was covered. We also had them throughout the different cities that we're vying for in the 45th Assembly District. So many of those turned in early ballots, but we're waiting to see how today moved forward. We understand that it's been a challenge for some voters to get there because of the rain that is coming down in our area. But we look forward to representing the people here, the 45th Assembly District, and representing tribal issues in the state legislature.
Well, again, we heard that some voters were evacuated because of mudslides and also water rescues. Any of you voters reach out to say that they were impacted?
So that was out in Forest Falls. When I was county supervisor, that was my district. But in the 45th Assembly District, now I represent the cities of Rialto, San Bernardino, Redlands, Mentone, and parts of Highland. So those areas weren't impacted. Now, I'm not sure if there's been some flooding that would keep people from getting into the voting precincts, but where they were evacuated, it was out by Forest Falls, up a little farther up the mountain.
Now, you say that you are representing a new district because your old district, the boundaries were redrawn. Has that impacted your campaign?
So how that has impacted my campaign, Rancho Cucamonga was in the 40th Assembly District, a large portion of the 40th Assembly District. The new 45th Assembly District is basically my same district without Rancho Cucamonga. I lose Rancho Cucamonga, but pick up all the city of Rialto. And I represented that city when I was on the Community College Board of Trustees when I got elected in 2005.
Now, you are the only, well, first of all, you're the first Native American elected to the California State Assembly. You remain the only Native American in the California State Assembly. Is that going to change in the next few elections?
I hope so. I was just out at Saboba Reservation and around the area there in their high school, San Jacinto High School, speaking and trying to encourage other members of tribes to get engaged in politics. Some of the youth from Saboba and San Manuel went up and lobbied a bill, AB 1703, the California Indian Education Act. So they testified in front of a committee hearing, right, talking about the importance of education, as well as got up to the podium and offered their support for the bill. That broke the ice of being engaged in the political system. They want to go back and continue to lobby more bills. I said, well, we have to make sure you get on the other side of the podium so that you're sitting in those seats moving forward.
Very good. And tell me about the watch party you have here tonight. It is a private event at the Tribes Casino. And of course, you are the former chairman of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. So who are your guests here tonight?
So a lot of the guests that are here today are supporters. We have with us some of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Association, the San Bernardino City Police Association, as well as we have iron workers. We also have different people from the business community here with us today. So a lot of the volunteers that volunteer time for our campaign and supporters have all been invited to come out and share with me this night when we start to see the results roll in.
And talking about results, do you expect to have a vote tally tonight and declare yourself the winner?
I think there's, at 8:30, there'll be the first results showing, and then again at 10:30. So we'll see how that margin shows. And then at that point, we could either say it's going to be a long night, or we're going to sit here and start thinking about bills to move forward the 45th Assembly District and to continue to champion the issues here in the state of California for our tribal communities, just like Feather Alert.
All right. Well, we will check back with you later in our coverage. So thank you so much for joining us, Assemblyman Ramos.
Thank you so much.
All right. So, Mark, you know, there are people coming in still at this event, and they're going strong tonight, hopefully, and hoping for a positive outcome for the election.
Thank you, Patty.
Let's go about an hour south to the Pechanga Resort and Casino, where FNX's Sahar Kajanori is stationed at the tribe's election watch party and joins us via Skype. Hi there, Sahar. Tell us what's going on there.
Good evening, Aliyah. We are standing here in the middle of the Pechanga Resort and Casino in a room full of tribal members, tribal elected officials, and various attendees. And I'd actually like to introduce one of our attendees today. So Michael Vasquez from Tribal Council. Hi.
Hi, how you guys doing? How's everybody doing?
Yeah, pleasure to see you tonight.
Yeah. Hopefully everybody's staying out of this weather in California. It's been a little hectic and wet out there.
You know, they say it never rains in California, and here we are.
Well, hopefully we're headed towards the rainy season because it's been a little dry out here. So of course we like the rain. So.
Well, come rain or shine, voters came to the polls, as did attendees here tonight. To talk about let's chat briefly. Can you summarize Prop 2627 for those who are not familiar?
So Prop 27 is our the online corporate measure, kind of ran by out-of-state corporations trying to somewhat get a playing for the California market. And of course, 26 is the tribally sponsored measure within California for all the California tribes. So in-person ID verification, honest area for us to support.
That's excellent. And then it's interesting to walk into the casino and to see information literature about Prop 26, about Prop 27, and people are very passionate about it. speaking about passionate, how do you feel the Native vote was rocked this year?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to thank all those voters for coming out and supporting this measure to oppose Prop 27. It's not a good thing for tribal country, and it's not a good thing for the people of California. So I just first want to reiterate, thank you guys so much. I know it's early to kind of to say this is defeated, but from the feeling and some of the things that we know, we're hoping for a strong output for that. And as far as our Prop 26 measure, we're hoping the support comes through for that, for the in-person ID verification sports measure. But it's kind of early for that, and I'm hoping you guys showed out and showed up for us. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
And you've heard it live here, and the spirits are high, and I feel like the night is only going to get better, and we are looking forward to increased turnout here at the Pechanga Watch Party.
Sahar, thank you.
Thanks, Aliyah.
In Minnesota, Tim Walz and Peggy Flanagan are seeking re-election as the governor and lieutenant governor. ICT Shirley Snavy is at their campaign watch party and joins us via Skype.
Hi there, how you guys doing? It's an exciting night.
What are you hearing?
I'm hearing a lot of buzz and excitement right now, and so far it looks like the Walz-Flanagan race are ahead, but it's too early to call right now. But we're very excited and expect Walz and Flanagan to show up really soon.
What are some of the other issues people in Minnesota are talking about?
The economy is the top issue right now. And the other thing is crime. And these are the things that come out of, obviously, the recession that we've been feeling. And the other thing is, remember, George Floyd died here at the beginning of the pandemic and called for abolish the police. And for some reason, that seemed to resonate with a lot of people, even though the Walz-Flanagan administration did not go that far. In fact, they even have allocated $300 million on the local level across the state to fight crime.
Well, and it's still, I mean, I saw the last gubernatorial debate, and it's still really a divisive issue about people's perception of crime and how crime is prosecuted.
That's really true. And I think the fact that George Floyd made such huge headlines all over the world really put a spotlight on Minnesota and the policies that were going on here as far as public safety is concerned. But, you know, I think we should also look at this as an opportunity for true reform across the country. Gun violence is something that has plagued our country during the pandemic and even still. And I think that that's something that we can take a look at right now and use this opportunity to change those things.
I want to shift gears and ask you about many Native people were disheartened with the pipeline in the northern part of the state and the governor and lieutenant governor's response to that. Is that something that's shown up with Native vote and how people perceive this administration?
I think that the issues that are facing Native people in the state of Minnesota are much larger than the pipeline. And I think that while they didn't actually do anything that promoted that, they went ahead and saw that as an economic possibility and something that needed to happen at that time. The thing that the Native vote is concerned about is missing and murdered Indigenous women. And that's something that the Walz-Flanagan campaign has really put a lot of effort in, establishing an office and creating that government-to-government relationship with the 11 tribes across the state.
Well, thank you, Shirley. We'll be back soon to check in again.
Thanks. Have fun.
Let's jump over to Missoula, Montana, where ICT's Colby Kicking Woman is awaiting results at the campaign watch party for State Senator Shane Morgeau. Colby joins us now via Skype. Hi, Colby.
Hey, Aliyah. Happy election night.
Happy election night to you. I hope you're getting some pizza, as us journalists say. Tell us what you're seeing there.
Yeah, it's a very cold night here in Missoula, but inside the Morgeau watch party, it's warm, very upbeat. They actually are having some pizza from a local joint tonight, surrounded by family, friends, supporters of Shane Morgeau, and the polls closed a short time ago, so it's just a waiting game until votes start being reported.
Colby, we know that there's a cohort of Native lawmakers there in the state legislature. Are you expecting, based on your reporting, for those lawmakers to be reelected tonight?
Yeah, so since 2005, Montana has had anywhere between 8 and 12 Native representatives in the state Senate and state House. That number is expected to hold this election cycle, which is unique because the American Indian population in Montana is around 7%. And so the representatives in the state legislature also equal that number.
And we understand that there's a former Interior Secretary running for a big seat there. Tell us about that and what his odds are of winning.
Yeah, so in the last census, Montana gained a congressional seat. And so the first congressional district of Montana is the western side of the state. Ryan Zinke was formerly represented Montana in Congress and was also the Interior Secretary under President Donald Trump. I covered a debate a couple weeks ago hosted by a debate hosted specifically on Native American topics. Unfortunately, Ryan Zinke wasn't there. I think it's important for the Native communities of the state to hear from their potential representatives on issues important to them, but it'll be a good race.
Speaking of former President Donald Trump, we saw in the 2020 election that the Crow tribe actually endorsed him for that position. Are you seeing that kind of support for Trump-endorsed candidates in this election as well?
No, ahead of the 2022 midterms, I did not see any endorsements from any tribes. In the Western Congressional District, as we were just discussing for Ryan Zinke and his Democratic opponent, Monica Traynell, there are two tribal nations, the Blackfeet Nation and the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribes, but they did not endorse either candidate. But it'll be interesting to see the turnout of the Native vote in the coming days.
Well, Colby, we'll check in with you again a little later. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Aliyah.
There's no script there, but we now will check in on some numbers, I believe, with Mackenzie Atlin Charmley.
Thanks, Mark. It's great. Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here at San Bernardino at FNX Studios to talk all things numbers. We're going to keep you updated on our Indigenous candidate, all things general tonight as well. Starting off in Oklahoma, congressional candidate Markwayne Mullin has won his seat, and that's pretty monumental. He's the first Cherokee Nation citizen, Native American to serve in that position since 2005. Other elections of importance we see moving to Virginia, Democrat and Comanche citizen Tasha Devon has lost her congressional race to incumbent Morgan Griffith to represent District 9. In Florida, Democrat Maxwell Alejandro Frost has won, and he is the first member of Generation Z, and that's pretty interesting for that state of Florida. Moving to the House, Republican Representative Tom Cole from the Chickasaw Nation is heading to victory against challenger Mary Brannon. And also in Oklahoma, Republican Governor Kevin Stitt is trailing his challenger Hoffmeister and has that endorsement from the 5 largest tribes. We're seeing that 52% of the vote compared to Stitt's 46%. There's still lots of data coming our way, but I'm looking forward to keeping everyone updated.
What are you seeing with any voting trends at this point?
Nothing too of importance right now. I will look further into it after this.
One of the things I was reading earlier is that we've seen 44 million early votes, which is pretty extraordinary. And so a lot of these early tallies will be from the early vote totals coming in.
Goodness, yes, and a lot of what the AP is calling is these early returns on the elections are just already showing and forecasting those wins pretty early on.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll be back with more. We'll be right back with more from Native Vote 2022 from Election Night Live.
Tonight's broadcast is supported in part by
Our vote is a hard-fought right. It hasn't always been valued, and we didn't choose this system of government. But our vote creates power in Indian country. It's one way we care for our elders, defend Indigenous women and girls, protect tribal sovereignty, and fight to improve our mental health. More information about voting is available at nativesvote2022.com. Brought to you by Native Public Media and Natives Vote.
and viewers like you.
FNX news, content, programs, and more are on the web at fnx.org. Access content on the go through a phone, tablet, laptop, or on a smart TV. And thank you for watching FNX on this, your local station. FNX.org. See you soon.
Welcome back to 2022 Native Vote Election Night Live. U.S. Representative Sharice Davids is seeking a third term in Congress. Redistricting this year changed the makeup of her district in Kansas, and it was feared her re-election might be in trouble. Recent polls show her doing well, and she's had a significant fundraising lead over her competitor. Davids won over her Republican opponent Amanda Adkins in 2020 by 10 percentage points. This year's election results are expected to be much closer. With more on the campaign, we joined Rhonda Lavaldo in Kansas City via Skype. Good evening, Rhonda. Hi, I'm hearing Rhonda. We have you via phone. Rhonda, if you can hear me, tell us what you're seeing there in Kansas City. I think we're having a little bit of trouble reaching Rhonda tonight. We should note that Sharice Davids is running for her third term in the U.S. Congress, and most notably, she was serving with the U.S. Representative at the time, Deb Haaland, who of course was tapped to become the Interior Secretary, and now Sharice Davids is hoping to be reelected for another term. Unfortunately, I am hearing that we're not able to reach Rhonda at this moment. So let's jump over to New Mexico, where we're attacking another race that could be impacted by redistricting. We're joined now by Source New Mexico reporter Sean Griswold, who's at a watch party there. Hi, Sean. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Aliyah, great to be here.
So tell us what you're seeing tonight and kind of what the feeling is there.
Okay, so we are in downtown Albuquerque, which was where Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland once held his congressional seat. You can look behind me here in Albuquerque. You got about several hundred Democrats here for the party, all waiting to hear from Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, who's seeking re-election here, as well as Representative Melanie Stansbury, who did take that seat when Secretary Haaland took the position within the Biden administration. We're waiting on early voting numbers at this moment. We've seen about 25% of early vote returned here in New Mexico, and that has actually shown a significant lead for Democrats so far at this moment, but at this point it's still too early to call any races.
Sean, of course, in New Mexico, we have Representative Yvette Harrell, who's a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Tell us about her campaign and kind of what you're seeing, and based on your reporting, if she'll win her re-election seat.
Yes, so Representative Yvette Harrell is down south in Las Cruces, so she is several hours away from Albuquerque. Part of her constituents, because of redistricting, is part of this Albuquerque area. Several thousand voters are now part of her new constituency. And so she did spend some time here talking with some of the Pueblo nations that she will now be representing, which is including part of Laguna, as well as Acoma Pueblos and parts of Zuni Pueblo. She also does represent members of the Apache Mescalero Band and the Navajo Nation. But at this moment, Yvette Harrell is down in early voting numbers to Democratic challenger Gabe Vasquez, who is also a person from down south. So it'll be interesting to see the dynamics that comes in with the new constituency base that is several hours up north.
Sean, we know that New Mexico, of course, is electing a new governor tonight. Tell us what you know about that and sort of where the opponents stand on Native issues.
Okay, so New Mexico right now is looking to re-elect a Democratic governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham. She has been leading in the polls throughout this entire campaign against her Republican challenger, Mark Ronchetti. One thing of significant about Michelle Lujan Grisham is that she has significant support from tribal nations here in New Mexico when it comes to government relationships. And in fact, tribal nations are excited to work with her. We saw an endorsement from the Navajo Nation presidential candidates, Jonathan Nez and Boo Nygren, who each came out to endorse Ms. Lujan Grisham's re-election campaign. While the All Pueblo Council of Governments, so the 19 groups here in New Mexico, have not come out with endorsements, their working relationship with the governor and most of the Democratic ticket on the state side is something that they're hoping to maintain and keep growing.
Sean, I want to talk about which issues are the most important to tribal leaders in New Mexico. You mentioned the All Pueblo Council of Governors, of course. Maybe talk about which issues seem to be front of mind for those tribal leaders in New Mexico.
So when it comes to federal races, one of the biggest issues we've been hearing a lot about is the expansion of tribal court systems. They want to see an investment by the federal government to meet the treaty needs of tribal law enforcement issues, tribal court systems. All of this is tied into missing, murdered Indigenous women groups that have been creating more investments. The Violence Against Women Act is something that was supported here by Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez as well as Representative Melanie Stansbury. Surprisingly, it was voted against by Representative Yvette Harrell. But those are issues that tribes here in New Mexico care about from their federal candidates. They also do care about understanding how they can support tribes in purchasing and acquiring land that was once stewarded by tribal nations. And that's something that they want to see federal government representatives support them. As well as with land, we come back to water issues and the water compacts that are significant for our agricultural communities in our tribal nations.
Well, Sean, we'll check in with you again a little later tonight. It sounds like the crowd is growing there, and it sounds like it's getting more and more exciting. But in the meantime, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Talk to you soon.
Oklahoma's state election board says over 50% of its voters are Republicans. In a state with a high Native population, conservative Indigenous views are common in Oklahoma. Dakota McDowell-Wapakichi has this story.
Democrats and Republicans, those two parties are top of mind for many during this year's midterm election. Data from ICT shows that majority of candidates running for public office in Oklahoma are Republican, and that's by a long shot. Dion Francis is a Native conservative from eastern Oklahoma, and he says party affiliation doesn't matter to him when it comes to voting.
As a conservative Native American, we want to support our culture, and we want to preserve our culture. I'm for tribal sovereignty. I'm for improving the quality of life in Indian country for Native Americans.
Now, Francis says that most people in his area are conservative, and he said that he's a big supporter of Native American candidates.
You know, whether they're here or other places, but I feel like they come the closest to supporting the ideas and concepts that I have, whether they're Democratic or Republican.
Mike Bread, another Native Republican, said he feels frowned upon by other Natives for being a Native Republican, but says it varies upon how someone is raised.
I think it all depends on kind of how you're raised, you know what I mean, and how you're brought up, and the beliefs that you're told that are a way of being. And some of my family's this way and other families this way, you know.
He said his kids made him care more about politics, which guided him toward being a Republican because of their stances on issues like abortion.
Here recently, you know, before I was probably 28, 27, 28, I really never even paid attention to, you know, I just kind of went about my own and didn't really pay any attention to, you know, the state of Oklahoma or the presidential election or any of that. And I just kind of did my own thing.
Now, Bread feels that everyone should concentrate on the youth to better the future.
Concentrate on our youth because that's our future, and there's nothing more important than improving the previous than the previous, generation, so.
Reporting in Oklahoma, Dakota McDowell-Wapakichi, ICT News.
We're going to join Dakota in Oklahoma City right now at the state GOP watch party via Skype. Hi there, Dakota.
We're looking this way. We're gonna go see if there's a plug-in over there.
Dakota, tell us what you're seeing there so far. It seems like there's some big news coming from Oklahoma with a future Native senator.
Yeah, the Native Senator Markwayne Mullin won his election pretty quickly. It was announced within the first 10 minutes, and I know you can hear the noise behind me. Cherokee Nation citizen Kevin Stitt won his re-election here in Oklahoma. He went on the stage about 10 minutes ago, and it's just starting to calm down, and the music's pretty loud. So there's a lot of people talking behind me, so there's a lot of excitement.
Dakota, when the governor spoke to the crowds there, what was his message and what are people rallying behind?
People are really following the dark money did not win is his message. Joy Hoffmeister had over about $50 million worth of dark money that helped her campaign, and Stitt said the people won today and that the dark money interest did not.
Dakota, you've been following this race really closely, specifically for the governor. Going into tonight, a lot of us thought that this was going to be a close race. Maybe tell us, how close you thought it would be and how it feels now to, of course, see Cherokee Nation citizen Kevin Stitt be reelected.
Well, if you would have asked me about a week ago, I would have said this race was probably a 48 to 48% chance and 4% going to the other candidates. But tonight it was quite different. There were over 500,000 votes toward Governor Kevin Stitt, and there were less than about 400,000, or right around there, for his challenger Joy Hoffmeister.
Dakota, you of course are at the GOP watch party. Give us an example of what the atmosphere is like. What's the vibe like there?
Well, it's pretty exciting. It was shoulder to shoulder inside here. I know you can't see it too much behind me, but I'll back up a little bit. There's a lot of people close to the stage. Right around me, it's starting to die down because of the announcement already being done. Most of the candidates that were here tonight are already out of here, and Governor Kevin Stitt is just kind of hanging around, shaking hands, thanking his donors and thanking his supporters for coming out tonight.
Dakota, the other big story, of course, is that 5 of the major tribes in Oklahoma actually endorsed the candidate that was running against Kevin Stitt. Tell us about that endorsement.
Yes, that endorsement came about a couple of weeks ago where the 5 civilized tribes in Oklahoma endorsed Joy Hoffmeister, who isn't Native. Now, just a little bit ago, I was able to talk to Donnell Harder, Governor Kevin Stitt's campaign manager, and she told me that Governor Stitt won those areas in the voting polls. So now he didn't win Cherokee County, but he won the area of which the eastern Oklahoma, the Indian reservations here.
So I guess a lot of us will be watching all of those votes very closely after this election to see exactly how that endorsement played out for tribes in Oklahoma.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, Dakota, we'll check in with you.
I mean, it was quite shocking.
I'm so sorry, Dakota. We'll check in with you again a little later. Thank you so much. Now let's jump over to ICT's bureau at Arizona State University's Cronkite School in Washington, D.C. Jordan Bennett-Begay is the editor of ICT and joins us now via Skype. Hi, Jordan.
Good to hear from you.
Jordan, at a high level, tell us what you're seeing so far and, anything that's surprising you right now.
Yeah, actually, as of 10:30 Eastern time, Sharice Davids is so far in the lead with 50% of the votes right now. So, and that is just really an interesting race to watch because, a lot of experts have said that she's in a competitive race due to the redistricting process. Her district was, one of the districts that was redrawn, and there was a lot of, conflict around that. And this is the first election where the redistricting maps were redrawn this time around. And as we heard earlier from James Ramos in California, redistricting has affected his district also. He lost a little area, but mostly it remains the same.
Jordan, earlier this year, actually it was last year, you were covering the U.S. Census. Maybe tell us how that data is playing into redistricting and kind of what you're seeing about the U.S. Census at a high level so far.
Yeah, so the census, this was the census. It happens every 10 years since 1790, and natives were actually not part of the decennial census until the 1860s. So this time it was really interesting to see, the most accurate count as we could get across the country. I like to describe the census as an Indian country selfie to see, where we are in 2020 across the nation. And this census was also particularly interesting because of the pandemic this time around. As we know, a lot of tribal nations close their communities to outsiders or even their own tribal citizens. And a lot of times those tribal citizens were hired by the census so they could get an accurate count. But despite all the setbacks, Native folks did participate and turn out. There was an increase of 86.5% of American Indians and Alaska Natives across the nation. And even with that big increase, a lot of experts say that there is still a huge undercount of Native people.
Jordan, I want to switch gears and talk about lawsuits against voting. We saw a number of those in different states across the country during this election cycle, but tell us what you know.
Sure. So I talked to Native American Rights Fund attorney Jacqueline De Leon, and she was saying that NARF, their organization, is actually watching 3 states in particular: Alaska, Arizona, and Wisconsin. In Alaska, she said that NARF, is taking the state to court after the state did not implement ballot curing provisions. So the state, in this case, failed to notify voters of clerical errors, and this resulted in higher rejection rates of those ballots in rural areas earlier this year, and particularly in a lot of Native communities up in Alaska. And actually all day today, NARF has had poll watchers across the country. They had the 8 attorneys on call just in case voters ran into issues when they were at the polls.
Jordan, we only have about a minute left here, but I do want to squeeze in that next week, a few weeks from now, there will be a really big event at the White House for tribal leaders. Very quickly, tell us about that and kind of what to expect.
Sure. So their White House Tribal Nation Summit is happening November 30th and December 1st. And this is the first time this huge event will be happening in person, actually a few blocks here at the Interior, where all tribal leaders across the country will be invited and be able to talk to high-level officials.
Well, Jordan, we'll check in with you guys again there in D.C. a little later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aliyah.
Every time a new U.S. president is elected to office, they select and appoint a huge team of professionals to help them achieve their goals. Looking at President Joe Biden's list, it looks quite different from presidents before him. I sat down with someone who knows a lot about Native people in public service. Here's Dick Trudell.
Biden has set the bar pretty high in terms of really being inclusive.
It first started with Secretary Deb Haaland in December 2020. Before Biden was officially sworn into office, he began building his cabinet. That was when he selected the Laguna Pueblo citizen to be his Interior Secretary. She made history, becoming the first Native American to ever serve as a cabinet secretary, and officially became 6th in line in succession to the presidency.
Deb has done a tremendous job, and I don't know when we'll see another cabinet member who's a Native person, so it's been a unique opportunity, and I think she's, gone about her business and really made a difference for Indian country.
In March of 2021 came the next big nomination. That's when President Biden appointed Janie Sims Hipp to be the general counsel of the Department of Agriculture. She was confirmed to that position 4 months later. In December 2021, Chuck Sams became the director of the National Park Service. That made him the first tribal citizen to ever lead the agency.
But I think we have more qualified people than we've ever had.
2022 has been a big year for appointments. In February, Navajo citizen Shelley Lowe became the chair for the National Endowment for the Humanities. She is the first Native person to lead that agency. In May 2022, Sunshine Sykes was confirmed as a judge in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. That made her the first Native federal judge in California and just the 7th Native federal judge ever appointed.
A month later, in June 2022, Lynn Malerba was called to be the Treasurer of the United States. She is the first Native person to serve in that position. And if you happen to find a newly printed dollar bill, you'll likely see Treasurer Malerba's signature on it. September 2022 was the most recent high-ranking confirmation when Rosalind So became the director of the Indian Health Service. Trudell says he has never seen a list with this many political appointments, and that dates back to the 1960s under the Nixon administration.
First of all, a lot of these people are political appointees, meaning that once the Biden administration ends, the incoming president at that time will, begin to, staff up again and everything.
Trudell says there are still areas of improvement, citing that Indian country needs more federal judges and more professionals in agencies like the Department of Justice. Aliyah, Chavez, ICT News.
We're nearing the end of our first hour of our 2022 Native Vote and Election Night Live. I'm joined now with two political commentators to take a deeper dive into some of the issues that we've heard tonight. Holly Cook-Macaro is a Democratic political consultant and public policy professional, and Mike Stopp is a Republican political consultant and former Chief of Staff to U.S. Representative Markwayne Mullin. Holly and Mike, hello to you both.
Hi, Aliyah.
Mike, let's start with you because, of course, you're the former Chief of Staff to, should we say, Senator-elect
Senator-elect, that's
Markwayne
right. It's an
Mullin.
exciting night.
Tell us what you're feeling at a high level.
At a very high level, I'm excited to be here tonight to talk about the important issues in Indian country. On a very personal level, I'm sorry I'm not at the celebration in Tulsa tonight. But I will tell you from a personal perspective, the first time I met Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, it's really that experience that turned me on to politics. Seeing a Native American in the U.S. Senate, the highest body, deliberative body in this country, knowing that an American Indian can be there and make a difference made a huge impact on me when I was in college. And to know that my good friend Markwayne Mullin is going to succeed that almost 20 years later, being the first Native elected to the Senate since 2005, it's just very exciting for us. And he has, we both grew up in Eastern Oklahoma in the Cherokee Nation, which we now recognize as a reservation since the McGirt decision. But it's been inspiring to watch him grow in that role as a Native advocate in Washington, and now to see him go to the Senate, I think is going to be great for Indian country.
Holly, you speak so often about bipartisanship in Congress, especially on Indigenous issues. Given that we, of course, are now going to have a U.S. Senator who's Native, maybe talk about what can be achieved with that or how you think that really helps Indian country.
Thank you, Aliyah. We often talk about how our Indian country tribal issues are nonpartisan, and so they don't divide along some black and white issues like abortion or taxes or those things. But part of the political evolution of Indian country has been the cultivation of friends and allies on both sides of the aisle, and that's been important because of the very nature and setup of what Congress looks like today, and that is a closely divided Senate and a closely divided House, almost unseen in the history of the United States about where we are at. It's a reflection of where we're at, as a country. And so that representation requires that in order for us to get anything done, and as tribal advocates, as tribal leaders, and for Indian country, we have to have support from both sides of the aisle. So having Markwayne Mullin join the U.S. Senate, I get shivers every time, no matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans, that we once again elevate a Native American to a position where people aren't used to seeing us in that space. And so I think we're all excited to see the senator, and congratulations to you, Mike. I congratulated him early on, jokingly said, that tight race for, Markwayne Mullin, but you know what that means when you can call it early and you bring it home? It means you did all the work before. So congratulations to Senator-elect Markwayne Mullin, his entire team, and to his tribe and family back at home as well. It's going to be just a really terrific ride and fun for the rest of us to watch that.
Absolutely, and I want to add on to what Holly was saying here in that while we're representing two different sides of the political spectrum, and we're going to get into some of that later throughout the night, My first experience on the Hill was working for the U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and I will tell you, of my time working on the Hill, it was the most bipartisan, or rather nonpartisan group to work with. When you look at Indian country, we need as many advocates as we can, and a lot of times it comes from telling our story and understanding where modern Native Americans come from. And that's why it's so exciting to have someone like Markwayne Mullin up there in the Senate to actually highlight those issues and talk about it.
Mike, let's actually talk more about that because Senator-elect Mullin, of course, as we know, is a Cherokee citizen, but maybe tell us about which issues pertaining to Native communities he cares most about on a personal level.
Yeah.
You, of course, know him very well, but tell us that.
It is without a doubt sovereignty. That is sovereignty and basically throwing off the shackles of what I would call paternalism. Having DC telling the tribes what to do, having them to have to answer to the Department of Interior or BIA, we want to move away from that and have self-determination. And Markwayne has been pushing that the entire time he's been in office. We see that not in just the places like energy development, but in economic development and letting them grow their own culture. We see plenty of issues in IHS that we continue to try to work through, letting tribes have more control over those things like we've seen with the joint venture project with the Cherokee Nation. We want to put more power in the hands of the tribes to make those decisions for themselves, and that is where Markwayne stands. And so having that powerful voice for self-determination and sovereignty in the Senate will be great for Indian country.
Holly, I want to jump to you because there are a number of Democrats running for Congress tonight. We saw Tasha Devon, of course, lost her race in Virginia, but tell us of the other Native Democrats running for Congress. Who's standing out to you right now?
Well, of course, as we've talked about before, all eyes have been on Alaska. Mary Peltola, she has caught the attention of all of Indian country and caught the rest of the country by surprise, I think, in one of the most closely watched races in the House. So that is, she is an experienced state legislator. She made that very evident even in the way she ran her campaign. She was very disciplined. She successfully raised over $2.5 million in this very short time frame from when she was declared the winner after that extended, count time in the ranked choice voting system that's in place in Alaska, and is looking very good as we go into tonight. We are looking forward to her bringing that same leadership and voice to the national stage, but we won't know whether that will actually take place for the next several days, as once again, that ranked choice voting system in Alaska plays out. It's going to be a couple of days before we know for sure who's the winner in Alaska.
Absolutely. And Mike, I'll ask you the same question of the Republican candidates. We heard a little bit earlier, Representative Tom Cole and, of course, Representative Yvette Harrell, but who's standing out to you right now?
Well, Tom Cole is, he's an institution for Indian country in Washington. He is very recently became the longest serving Native American for any member of Congress while his time in the House. He is the person they look to when it comes to Indian policy from a legislative standpoint. So having Tom in office is absolutely important. Yvette, still new, she's finding her feet. Seems to want to be a voice for Indian country. She didn't really start out that way. I think she's starting to understand that. Markwayne went through a very similar transition. And I did in my own personal life. I didn't recognize what it meant to be a Cherokee or Native American until I wasn't in the community. I grew up in Indian country. When I moved off to school in New York and wasn't surrounded by other natives, it helped me appreciate what it means to be a native. And I think when you get to Washington, after living in Oklahoma for so long, you start to appreciate that as well. And I think you're seeing that in some of our Republican Native elected officials as well.
Absolutely. Well, Mike and Holly, we'll check in with you again a little bit later. In the meantime, I'm hearing that our time is up. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Leah.
We'll be right back.
Tonight's broadcast is supported in part by
Our vote is a hard-fought right. It hasn't always been valued, and we didn't choose this system of government. But our vote creates power in Indian country. It's one way we care for our elders, defend Indigenous women and girls, protect tribal sovereignty, and fight to improve our mental health. More information about voting is available at nativesvote2022.com. Brought to you by Native Public Media and Natives Vote.
and viewers like you.
FNX news, content, programs, and more are on the web at fnx.org. Access content on the go through a phone, tablet, laptop, or on a smart TV. And thank you for watching FNX on this, your local station. FNX.org. See you soon.
From the studios of FNX First Nations Experience, welcome to the second hour of Native Vote 2022 Election Night Live. Good evening. I'm Aliyah Chavez, the anchor of the ICT newscast.
And I'm Mark Trahant from ICT.
We continue our coverage in Alaska, where the state is trying out a new election process.
That's right, Aliyah. Open primaries and ranked choice voting. The new procedures were put to a test in a recent special election to complete the term of the late Representative Don Young. ICT's Jacqueline Estes has more on the process.
Let's start with the basics of how most candidates are elected. In most primary elections, political parties like Republicans, Democrats, or Independents pick the candidates. Parties act as gatekeepers for who gets to run in the general election. That gate is wide open in Alaska. Michelle Spark, who is Yupik, explains.
Everyone with a dream and $100 could apply and fill out the paperwork if they were eligible. They became a candidate.
In Alaska, candidates can only win with the majority of votes. That's due to ranked choice voting, a process in which voters rank candidates in order of preference. If none of them get a majority, the lowest vote getter is dropped. Their second choice votes go to the other candidates in an instant runoff. That continues until someone gets a majority. Sparks said with ranked choice voting, candidates need to run a different kind of campaign. They need to reach out to people outside their party.
I think the open primary system really opens a lot of doors, and it kind of moderates people's campaigns and positions. They have to appeal to a lot more than a fraction of their base in order to be a lawmaker of the caliber that you should be when you're representing the majority and not just the plurality. So we're pretty excited about the open primary system.
We saw this play out in August in Alaska's special election. Representative Mary Peltola is Yupik and a Democrat. She got the most votes in the first count, but didn't get a majority. Counting second-choice ballots brought her a majority of votes over Republicans Nick Begich and Sarah Palin. Political commentator Matt Buxton with the Midnight Sun podcast said the system worked as it should.
I think the system, almost the most important thing to me is that it really allowed the voters to, kind of find their candidate of choice.
Maine and several municipalities, including New York City, also use ranked choice voting. Jacqueline Estes, ICT News.
We're now connected via Skype to ICT's Jacqueline Estes. She's in Anchorage at the 49th State Brewing Company. That's where Representative Mary Peltola is hosting her campaign watch party. Good evening, Jacqueline.
Good evening. It's good to see you guys. So, yeah, I'm at the 49th State Brewery, and people are just trickling in. It's we have another hour before the polls close. I have John Butsky here, a filmmaker, and he was just commenting that probably people are still standing on street corners waving signs for the last voters who are headed to the ballot box. So something else that's going to be trickling in is the returns. We're here at a watch party, and they'll be counting ballots that come into metropolitan areas and have scanners, and we'll get those returns tonight. But the returns from rural areas will come in, they'll come trickling in over a period of days, and then we have to wait for ballots from overseas, and we won't see those. They don't close the gates, so to speak, until November 23rd. And then we have the runoff for the second choice votes if nobody has taken a majority of the votes yet.
What have you been hearing on just from ordinary people about the candidacy of Mary Peltola for a full term and just kind of the perception out there?
Well, judging from her reception at the Alaska Federation of Natives People, Alaska Natives are wild for Mary Peltola. I mean, sometimes at AFN, the audience acts as one, and that happened when Mary Peltola went to the stage. Everybody rose to their feet and just applauded wildly for a couple of minutes, and afterwards sung hymns of thanksgiving and blessings in Inupiaq, Yupik, and Athabascan. And so it was very powerful, very moving, and you don't see that very often for candidates.
She's campaigned really hard on being a congresswoman for all of Alaska. Do people kind of see it that way there too?
Well, I think so. I mean, like you said, that's been her campaign message. And Don Young that was how he advertised himself as well. And at AFN, his daughters presented her with a bolo tie, Athabascan hand-beaded circular disc with the state of Alaska on it. And, and that was, to him, that symbolized that he was a representative for all Alaska. Her daughters gave her that, and that again was a moving ceremony. And I think that is how people are seeing her.
Well, Jacqueline, it's great to see you, and we will check back in with you a little bit later tonight.
Great, thanks a bunch.
Let's do something now. Let's do something now that many Alaskans love to do. We'll head to Hawaii.
Out of more than 730,000 early ballots sent out to Hawaii voters, about 27% had been returned as of a week ago. For more on this story, Chad Blair of Honolulu Civil Beat, a nonprofit public service news organization, joins us from their offices. Good evening, Chad.
Aloha to you, Aliyah, and aloha to Mark as well. Sorry I don't have palm trees and the ocean behind me. We're here at our office covering election night just like you guys.
Chad, tell us at a high level which races that you're watching that involve Native Hawaiian candidates so far.
The highest profile race is the race for governor. That includes the Democratic candidate. He's the current lieutenant governor. His name is Josh Green. He's originally from Pittsburgh. He's a medical doctor. And the Republican candidate is a former lieutenant governor. His name is Duke Iona, and he is Native Hawaiian, one of the few Native Hawaiians to serve in the higher echelons of power here in the state of Hawaii. We're not expecting a terribly close race. Duke Iona has run twice before for this same position and lost badly each time. Our polls, however, have not closed yet. Just like you guys, at 7 o'clock, we may see the first results. But that would be the most high-profile race we have with a Native Hawaiian on the ballot.
Chad, I want to ask you about Representative Kai Kahele, who is a Native Hawaiian, of course. He is retiring after this, well, I shouldn't say retiring, but he has a particularly interesting case. So tell us about that.
I'm glad you brought that up. Similarly, we've only sent 2 Native Hawaiians, Hawaii, to the nation's capital since statehood. That was in 1959. right after Alaska. And the first was Dan Akaka. He served in the House and then the Senate. He passed away a few years ago. Kaikahele is only the second Native Hawaiian, and he was elected not even 2 years ago. And many people hoped that he would stay in Congress, probably moving to the U.S. Senate at some point. Very charismatic, very talented, a remarkable young man. And yet he surprised everybody when he decided to retire, as you say, from Congress. But he ran for governor against Josh Green in the Democratic primary. He did not do well. He actually finished third. There was another candidate that finished second. And many people bemoaning that thought he'd be a good representative in the nation's capital, but he felt he needed to come back home.
And do we know yet if Representative Kahele has any future plans for public office?
He didn't say much after he lost the primary in August, but he did post a little video a couple of weeks later, he and his wife. And at the end of the video, they plugged the website for Kaikahele. You can find it, kaikahele.com. And if you scroll down to the bottom of it, you'll actually see a counter. It essentially says, there's 4 years and counting to go until the next governor's race. So kind of a hint that he may run again for governor 4 years from now. We'll see if that happens. No formal declaration, but clearly he believes that he has a future here in Hawaii politics.
Chad, you actually reported a story about Kaikahele, and we only have about a minute left here, but I want to make sure our viewers learn more about that reporting. Tell us about it.
Yes, this is Nick Ruby, our D.C. correspondent, and he was able to uncover the information that Kaikahele, even though he was serving in Congress, still is serving in Congress, also continued to fly as a pilot for Hawaiian Airlines. Very unusual for someone in Congress to keep a job like that. He got approval to do it, but it made people go, are you really serious about Congress if you're still flying for Hawaiian Airlines? One other thing, and it also turned out that he voted by proxy more than just about any other candidate, meaning he could vote in the U.S. House but not actually be there. And that made people wonder because his criticism of his predecessor, Tulsi Gabbard, was that she was spending all her time outside of Washington rather than in Washington serving Hawaii.
Well, Chad Blair of Honolulu Civil Beat, thank you so much.
Take care, Aliyah. Aloha.
One of the races that has been called now by the Associated Press is the Oklahoma governor's race. Republican Kevin Stitt held off a bruising challenge to re-election from Democrat Joy Hoffmeister. We now have our correspondent, Dakota. There he is.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm right here. The governor is right next to me. He's talking to someone else right now, though.
Tell us what's going on while he's coming over.
Yeah, right now he's been talking to the media, talking about really what he's specifically, like I mentioned earlier, the dark money special interest he mentioned and the funding there. But he's saying this is a win for Oklahoma. Whenever he gets here in a second, we'll ask him about, what would you like to say to Oklahoma Native American voters? Does Native American Nation about what Oklahoma is about a little bit of the tribal nations conflict between him and the tribal nations.
Here he is.
Okay, awesome. I got Governor Kevin Stitt right here. Yeah. So, Governor, what would you like to say to Native voters in Oklahoma specifically?
Oh man, first off, the Native voters are a bunch of my cousins all voted. Rodeo Association. I'm a member of the Cherokee Heritage, and it's so important to have the Native support. And I think I won most of the Native counties in Oklahoma tonight because they think like we do. We believe in smaller government, lower taxes. We believe in traditional family values. So Native values, they're all Oklahomans just like me, and we have the same type of values.
Perfect. And now, we were your address earlier when you won. There was a lot of polling that was.
Okay. I apologize for the feed. We're going to try to get that back a little bit better. This is the great technology of the 21st century. We're now joined by Jacqueline DeLeon via Skype. She is a staff attorney for the Native American Rights Fund, also known as NARF. NARF is monitoring issues at the polls this year.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
Hi. What are you seeing so far in terms of voter rights tonight?
Well, NARF ran this year its largest poll watching program, and really the largest poll watching program in Indian country history, nearly 40 poll watchers across Indian country. And they reported to us a variety of issues, really the issues that we have been tracking for a long time regarding sort of the infrastructure failings that plague Indian country. So we saw issues with mail-in ballots, people not receiving their ballots. We saw issues with voter IDs, trouble with addressing, and other issues like that related to infrastructure throughout the day.
There's a lot of election deniers on the ballot this year, and as they start to take office, depending on how the night shakes out, how will that increase the challenges for Native voters?
Well, Native votes are American votes, and we this year ran a billboard campaign because we anticipated that this election denialism would impact Indian country. Those billboards said, we are the first Americans, count our votes. And we know that across Indian country, Native votes are going to come in later than a lot of other votes because they are distant and they have to travel, long remote roads in order to get to be counted. And so, we are pushing back against the narrative that, any legally cast ballot has to be counted tonight. We expect returns to be coming in throughout the next couple of days.
Well, that's interesting how that whole narrative got hold in this recent years, because the idea ought to be to make sure everyone vote counts and to be accurate. And suddenly it became more about speed.
At the end of the day, Native Americans are American citizens. Our votes count and they deserve to be counted. And anything that gets in the way of a fair and accurate count is not legitimate, and we'll fight to make sure that every Native vote is counted.
One of the challenges that I think some people out in the broader community don't understand is when you take a program that works really well in cities, for example, mail-in ballots, and how that gets complicated when it's in a tribal community where you might have multiple households or PO boxes.
That's right. So, we have to remember that Indian country may be different than the rest of the country, and voting should be for everybody. So if you don't get mail delivered to your home, if your address doesn't have a home, if there's 12 people living in the home, it's really difficult to get a mail ballot. And it's really difficult to deliver that ballot. And that's why this past year we fought really hard in Montana to make sure that ballot collection remained legal. And today on Election Day, we saw reports of get out the vote organizations like Western Native Voice all over Montana, picking up ballots, returning Native ballots. So we're here to fight to make sure that Native votes have a fair opportunity to be counted.
We only have about 30 seconds left, but I want to ask you about in Montana, one of the provisions is same-day registration. How important is that?
Yeah, so it was a really interesting, we had a bunch of poll watchers out today, and that was another battle that we fought and won to make sure that Election Day registration was available. And we had widespread reports that Election Day registration was being used, and that there was, unfortunately some significant wait times to wait for Election Day registration. But I think that really just speaks to the fact that it's necessary in Native communities.
Jacqueline DeLeon, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Let's hop to Washington now to talk to state lawmaker Deborah Lekanoff. She is a Democrat serving in the state house and currently the only Native member of the state's legislature. Representative Lekanoff joins us via Skype. Good evening.
Hi, it's so good to see you, Mark. I've had a landslide victory. Coming into my third term, it's wonderful and powerful to be serving the state legislature. I ran unopposed this year, had a slight competitive person this year, but again, it's great to have the opportunity to serve Washington State as the only Native American in the entire state legislature.
This gives you a chance to raise some really important issues in that community. What are some of the priorities you have for the next term?
We know that rising cost of living has come and harmed and impacted most of our Native American communities, our people of color, and our rural communities. I'll be working on the implementation of the Climate Commitment Act to ensure that we address renewable energy projects for utilities that lower the cost for our members we'll be working on salmon recovery and salmon planning across Washington state. We're looking at also doing reform on education that enables us to take our rural community, our communities of color, and our Native American communities and take what we've learned in the last 2 years of alternative learning mechanisms and how do we incorporate that best in Washington state. I'm really excited to be able to support our Democrats this year on many of the initiatives that impact all of our communities, but I'm also, as always, excited to work with those across the aisle and working with our Republicans to find common platforms. I guess that's what makes me a little unique, Mark. I'm Native American first to serve all, and then I work with all others to get them elected and to find policies that reflect all communities.
One of the issues that's so important in Washington state and beyond is missing and murdered Indigenous women and people. And I know you've put a lot of time and effort into that. Maybe talk about some of the initiatives there.
Thank you. This year, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force will be looking to incorporate a cold case office within the Attorney General's office, which is the highest office that really is looking to protect our missing and murdered Indigenous women. We'll also be expanding and working with the Governors Association. And with that, meaning all governing bodies within the Northwest and with British Columbia First Nations to the north, to see if we could also incorporate the tools that we're using for the murdered and Indigenous women and people, but then also what can we do across state boundaries and what can we do with British Columbia First Nations in the north and with their provincial government.
One of the other issues, Washington state in previous years has had much more representation in the legislature. How do you get others interested in running and winning offices?
Oh, thank you, Mark. This year, I'm so excited to support past Senator Claudia Kaufman, Chris Stearns, and we also have a young woman, Lauren from Yakima Nation. Her bloodlines actually are rooted into Washington state, and her bloodlines will be, when she wins, and I'm hoping she gets it over in Yakima, will be sang and heard on the floor of the People's House. And I think that's going to be a monumental victory for all of us. We can go from 1 to 4 in Washington state, and that's going to be an incredible victory for not only our Native American communities, but our rural communities, but also for the state legislature to understand and value what it is to have the first people of Washington state serving on the floor of the People's House and making legislative decisions that really are going to be impactful for all communities.
Representative Deborah Lekanoff, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay.
Good luck to all.
Thank you.
Let's jump over to Minnesota, where we have ICT's Shirley Snavy with an interview with Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. Hi, Shirley, can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We'd love to hear from the Lieutenant Governor.
Great. Thanks, Aliyah. It's been an exciting night here in downtown St. Paul, and with me is Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. And are you optimistic?
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think the numbers that we see coming back for Democrats up and down the ballot here in Minnesota are pretty positive. I'm not going to count my chickens until they call it, but we feel good.
I think there's almost half of the electoral has been counted. And so far, the Walz-Flanagan campaign is in the positive, so that's good. The issues have been hard this year, I think. And what comes to mind for you as the top issues that voters are talking about today?
Well, I think the things that we've been hearing about when we're in the community, clearly making sure that our schools are fully funded. One of the things I think that the ICT audience would care about is that we passed Indigenous education for all, and we need to make sure that it is funded into the future. So that's something that's really important to us. The issue of choice was certainly on the minds of Minnesotans. We saw numbers, especially for young women, college-aged women, turning out in large numbers. Body autonomy, the ability to make your own healthcare choices, I think is something that we heard loud and clear. And really, in many ways, just kindness and compassion, I think, were on the ballot. Our opponents, certainly talked about this vision, or frankly lack thereof, of a Minnesota where some folks were in and some people were out, and some people were worthy of rights and dignity and even love when it came to our LGBTQ plus community. And so, our vision of one Minnesota, I think, is something that continues to resonate with people. And we tried to run a really positive campaign, and I think the results so far are, show that Minnesotans appreciated that.
Minnesota is a very diverse state. It is a North Star state, and you have amazing commerce here as well as natural resources. I can imagine that tribes have a different take on what natural resources use looks like.
Well, I think one of the things that I've been really proud of is the creation of our Tribal State Relations Office in the Office of the Governor. We passed, the governor moved Executive Order 1924, which then he signed into law, which calls for consultation with all of our tribes, with all of our agencies. Every commissioner, deputy commissioner, assistant commissioner has to go through Tribal State Relations training. And, that is the work, I think, that we've been doing during our 4 years in office. The governor said, I want people to look at Minnesota and say that's where they get tribal state relations right. We don't always get it right, but we are doing our best. And my hope is that you don't need an Ojibwe woman as your lieutenant governor to be able to have strong relationships with the tribes across the state.
And we've seen a lot of progress on missing and murdered Indigenous women.
We just won.
Oh.
Did we hear that? Did we hear that correctly?
So you heard it here first, ICT. We just won, and so it's very exciting, very exciting.
All right. So, well, congratulations, and I'm glad you could join us and that you heard it here first, ICT audiences.
Let's hear from the Lieutenant Governor of what her reaction is, given that she's just.
Okay. So, what's your reaction now that you've won?
Very excited that we have won re-election, and just really looking forward to the good work that we can do for people across Minnesota. Thank you.
And we were talking earlier about she is a 9-year-old, and we think she's sleeping, but I bet she's up. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Miigwech.
Well, what's some news there? It looks like Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan and her, of course, Governor Tim Walz have clinched their re-election bid to another term. Let's check in with our correspondent Jody Raves Spotted Bear, who is at the Lisa Finley DeVille Watch Party in the Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation in North Dakota and joins us via Skype. Hi there, Jody.
Hi, Aliyah.
We understand you have a candidate there with us. Tell us about her.
Yeah, I'm here with Lisa Finley DeVille, and we've got her election results right now. If you can see the screen right now, she's at 69%, and that is with fully 7 of the 9 districts reporting.
And
we need to back up. Yep.
And we'd love to hear from Lisa herself. Maybe tell us a little bit about her platform.
Yeah, Lisa, we'd like you to share your platform with the viewers.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. So my platform right now is environmental protections, protecting our natural resources, protecting farmers, ranchers.
Oh, sorry. Can you turn that down?
Okay. Yeah, but go ahead. Did you? Yeah, I already said it. I mean, not all of it. Of course, the economy, education, and all that are very important to me. Making sure that we prepare our people for the aftermath from oil and gas. So those are very important.
Lisa, we'd love to hear about the historic nature of your election, given that you have the potential of becoming one of 2 Native women elected to the North Dakota State Legislature. Maybe comment on that.
Did you hear that?
Yeah. Okay.
That I answered. No. Okay, so the next question is, can you comment on the historic nature of your election as one of only two Native? Well, Ruth Buffalo lost her race tonight, so according to the results. So Lisa,
Jody, we'll have to check in with you all a little later. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Stay tuned. You're
Tonight's
watching.
broadcast is supported in part by
Our vote is a hard-fought right.
Ruth Buffalo
It
lost?
hasn't always been valued, and we didn't
Just as we
choose
won.
this system of government. But our vote creates power in Indian country. It's one way we care for our elders, defend Indigenous women and girls, protect tribal sovereignty, and fight to improve our mental health. More information about voting is available at nativesvote2022.com. Brought to you by Native Public Media and Natives Vote.
and viewers like you.
FNX news, content, programs, and more are on the web at fnx.org. Access content on the go through a phone, tablet, laptop, or on a smart TV. And thank you for watching FNX on this, your local station. FNX.org. See you soon.
Welcome back to 2022 Native Vote Election Night Live. I'm Aliyah Chavez.
And I'm Mark Trahant with ICT.
We'd love to give you some updates tonight. We're hearing so far that a number of Native candidates have won their elections. We're seeing Cherokee citizen Markwayne Mullin in Oklahoma who has won. Sharice Davids, a Democrat from Kansas, has also won her term. And also we've seen Tom Cole in Oklahoma who has also won. We'll continue our coverage a little later.
Abortion rights was a major campaign theme this year, especially in states with so-called trigger laws that effectively banned abortion after the Supreme Court overruled Roe v. Wade.
The Dobbs ruling by the Supreme Court gave individual states the authority to decide how they want to govern on abortion care.
Indigenous federal lawmakers all vary on their views, even though abortion has been a hot topic of conversation. Here is ICT's Polly Dennett-Claw with the story.
And so my message has always been, my body, my choice, my decision.
That's what longtime abortion advocate Cecilia Firethunder said on the issue during an interview with ICT. Political pundits and election experts have predicted the overturn of Roe versus Wade will encourage people to vote. That's noteworthy because midterms typically mean lower voter turnout. The chairman of the Walker River Paiute tribe in Nevada says having single-issue voters might make a difference.
We showed as Native people when we band together, we're stronger as one voice. And I think we really just need to get that message out that it's imperative that Indian country gets out and votes, especially in these swing states.
The new ruling by the Supreme Court says that states, not the federal government, can decide people's access to abortion care. In places like Oklahoma, South Dakota, and Texas, this has meant an all-out ban on the procedure. Indigenous politicians, including Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, has spoken out about the issue. In a tweet, Flanagan said she believes the people of her state will protect reproductive health care in this year's election. But not every Indigenous politician feels the same. U.S. Representative Yvette Harrell took to social media after the court's decision. She wrote the caption, "Praise God." The image depicts the Supreme Court with all capital letters saying, "Life wins." U.S. Representative Markwayne Mullin has also been outspoken about blocking abortion access, tweeting that the Supreme Court ruling would, quote, save millions of lives. Access to abortion care is a polarizing issue that pundits say has woken up the Democratic voting base. Alaska is a state that strongly leans conservative. Democrat Mary Peltola became the state's first Indigenous congressional representative, despite her vocal support of abortion.
So I just personally feel that a woman's reproductive rights are sacred, and the way that a woman and her family decide to build their family is 100% her choice. And it is no business of the government to interfere with that.
With November 8th's midterm elections, Americans will finally be able to tell how the Supreme Court decision is playing out for voters. Polly Denetclaw, ICT News.
Now let's connect with via Skype. Hi, Polly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Tell us about your reporting on this story and what you learned in the process.
Yes, so I've been reporting on the abortion issue since I first joined ICT in April. And at that point, Oklahoma had just passed the heartbeat bill, which deeply impacted access to abortion in the state. And at that time, the Supreme Court had not made its ruling, but during the summer, that was going to be, the oral arguments were going to be heard. And so I've been following this since I joined ICT.
One of the things that a lot of people don't know outside of the Indian health system is that some of these provisions have been in place for IHS before the Dobbs decision.
Yes, so the Hyde Amendment has effectively banned abortion access for Indigenous communities. The Hyde Amendment bans the use of federal dollars, and Alaska Native and Native American folks use IHS facilities, Indian Health Service, and those facilities are ran by federal dollars. And so when you ban the use of federal dollars for a procedure like abortions, you limit access for that community to access this procedure.
Polly, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's jump back over to North Dakota, where Jody Rave's spotted bear. We unfortunately cut her off on that interview a little earlier with Lisa Finley DeVille. But Jody, we have you here now. Go ahead and ask your questions to the candidate yourself so that we can hear more from her.
Okay, thank you again for having us back. So we're here with Lisa Finley DeVille. Lisa, you have worked really tirelessly with the North Dakota Resource Council, and that led you into making the decision to run for the state legislature. Can you tell us about the work that you did with the Resource Council?
A lot of the work that we worked on was a lot of the environmental impacts from oil and gas. So anywhere from the flaring to the pipeline spills to health impacts, such as like the Bach and cough, which I was infected with, and that's why the health part became very important to me, because I worry about what we breathe and what we're drinking. You know, if we can grow our food on the soil. I mean, all these things. What I'm bringing to the legislation is going to be is different because they don't know what the struggles and realities that we live with here in the Bakken region. Anywhere from environmental justice. I'm not against oil and gas. I just want to make sure that that we can do a better job at protecting our land and our people.
What are some of the other health concerns that you are seeing? For example, flaring, how does that impact?
So a lot of that, a lot of nosebleeds with our children, and the asthma is also on the increase with our people. Yeah.
Okay. And then also we have an issue on, so the Fort Berthold Reservation is based atop the Bakken. North Dakota is the second largest oil producer in the United States. And what does the air quality situation look like? Are there air quality monitors 15 years into oil development on the Fort Berthold Reservation and in North Dakota?
See, that has been a challenge for us because that is something that we've been fighting for the past, since 2014. We've continuously lobbied for air quality monitors here on Fort Berthold. We've gone, tribal to bring these monitors here, but it's been a challenge for us. I don't understand exactly why, because even though we asked for these laws to be passed, I mean, we can't even create laws properly for environmental justice because we don't have those studies. So that's why it's very important to have these studies and these research to create those environmental laws.
What do you think? What are some of the bills that you expect to tackle once you get into the legislature? Because based on the results, you will be the newly elected representative for the new sub-district 4A.
A lot of my issues are going to be on the environment and protecting our health and protecting our natural resources. So it's going to be something new, because the legislation people in Bismarck, they don't know the realities what we live with and the struggles that we live with here in the Bakken.
And what do you think your time is going to be like? So for the viewers that are just tuning in, Lisa will be the only representative, the only woman in the North Dakota legislature. We just got news that it looks like Ruth Buffalo will lose her race over there in the Fargo district. So what do you think these next few months or years are going to look like?
I'm optimistic. I mean, I'm going to keep pushing forward with all the work that I'm doing, and I will continue to fight for my land and for my people.
We heard it here first. Jody, thank you so much for that interview, and we'll check in with you all a little bit later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Last month, I interviewed two of Kansas's departing Native lawmakers on the ICT newscast. We have clips from those interviews to share tonight. First up is Representative Stephanie Byers, whose 2020 victory made history when she became the first openly transgender person to serve in the Kansas state legislature.
Like many people across the country, I'm of an age where my parents and my wife's parents are, in that time of life where a lot of times the health conditions are not the best. And so we have chosen to no longer be in Kansas, but to move closer to her parents so that we can give back to them all the things that they gave to us when we were younger, be able to take care of our elders and be there for them as they continue aging in this time of life.
That's such a beautiful sacrifice to take on, as you just said, as they cared for you in your life. I want to talk about legislation, of course, that you're most proud of. If you had to, name a few, what would you say?
I think some of the stuff that we're most proud of, obviously in Kansas, we've had some legislation that have come through that offered opportunities for the people of Kansas to vote on a constitutional amendment. And we were able to maintain the fact that there should be an opportunity for people who are of birthing quality to be able to make decisions with their doctor and not be mandated by the state. A lot of the legislation that we've seen come through, are simple things. Sometimes we don't think about, we think about how we change how an antique auto is determined, or we talk about, what has to happen with license plates on dump trucks. But most of what I've spent my time with has been working to defend current laws we have in the state of Kansas so they don't get changed to make them more discriminatory in practice.
You made history in 2020 as the first trans woman elected to the Kansas state legislature. Do you think that carried into your service? I know that you've been very outspoken about that.
Absolutely. We talk about representation, how much that it matters. Being someone who is transgender and in a conservative legislature where you would see bills come forward that would attack healthcare for trans youth or attack athletic opportunities for trans youth, having someone who has that identity be able to stand in those spaces and to speak on behalf of those peoples makes a tremendous impact for those around. It brings hope to those folks that are outside of the state house to know that there's someone like them standing in the places where those decisions are made.
That was outgoing Kansas Representative Stephanie Byers talking about her choice to not run for another term. Ponca Victor's Cozad will have served for 12 years in the Kansas state legislature at the end of her term this year. Here she shares more on her decision to leave elected office.
I definitely wanted to pave the way for other Native women in the political system, in the political world. And I also wanted to encourage Native women to run for office because it's so needed. Our voice is needed on all levels of government, county, state, municipal, water board, whatever it may be. And I definitely passed a lot of legislation, and being a brown woman, a Democrat in a red state, I got it to the governor's desk, and I'm very thankful and proud that I had a lot of colleagues that supported me on both sides of the aisle, from MMIW all the way, veterans bills, education bills, to make sure that we had a voice at the table.
At the beginning of this term, there were 3 Native women who were serving as Kansas state lawmakers. For our viewers who aren't very familiar with, the politics of Kansas, tell us where we'll be after this term and sort of what it'll mean for, Native politics moving forward in Kansas.
Well, we are Representative Haswood. I recruited her from the Lawrence area. And Representative Byers is going to step back from political life, and as well as myself. And so Representative Haswood, she has the torch now, and I did all I could to be her mentor, and I'm still a mentor to her. And, just building those relationships and to continue on being our voice and working with the tribes in Kansas, it's so important.
The departure of State Representative Punkaway Vickers-Cozad and Stephanie Byers leaves only one Native lawmaker in the Kansas legislature, Representative Christina Haswood.
Let's go to the state GOP watch party in Oklahoma City with Dakota McDowell-Wapakichi. Hi, Dakota.
Hey, how's it going?
You had the newly elected governor, Kevin Stitt, there with you. Tell us what he said. Unfortunately, we ran out of audio there.
Yeah, we were talking about the polls, and what he was talking about was it was kind of despicable the way the polls were working in Oklahoma. For many who, for the people who may not know, the polls were projecting that Joy Hoffmeister was going to win this election. She was around 52% going into election night. And then today she lost by a considerable amount. So we talked about that, and then we also talked about what he kind of hopes for Native voters. Before we even got there on the live shot, I talked with him and with a couple other reporters, and he was talking about how he wants to better the relationships if possible. He'd love to have them talk with the tribal nations here in Oklahoma and make a better relationship after what all has been done with the McGirt case and also the Castro-Huerta case.
Dakota, I'm not sure if I heard correctly, but I think I heard him say that he believes that he won a lot of the Native vote tonight. Did I hear that correctly?
You did, yeah. His campaign manager came before he was actually out here, and she told me that he did win a lot of the Indian reservation areas in eastern Oklahoma.
And was that something that he seemed excited about?
Yes, he was very excited about that. Going into this, there was a lot of doubt coming from that part of the state, not from his campaign, but from people watching, supporters, voters. There was a lot of doubt that he would maybe get the vote in eastern Oklahoma because of the relationships between the tribal nations and the governor. In the last 2 years, that relationships have really gone downhill with those 2 Supreme Court cases. But even before that, the Oklahoma Tribal Gaming Compact really put a bend into that relationship that it was just going to keep going and keep bending down, and it just never really recovered after that. So, at the debate about 2-3 weeks ago, he even mentioned, he was like, if they can come in tomorrow at 10 a.m. After the debate, he'd love to have that conversation. Now, that didn't happen, but he did say he'd be willing to listen and have a good conversation, but there has to be leeway.
Dakota, we know that you're at the state GOP watch party, and it seems as though Governor Stitt has been a large topic of conversation, but maybe tell us how much Markwayne Mullin has come up tonight.
Yeah, Markwayne Mullin has come up a decent amount here at the Oklahoma GOP party. Sadly, he's not here in Oklahoma City. He's up in Tulsa, about 2 hours away at his own watch party. But here they did announce that he won. And whenever it was announced that Markwayne Mullin won, the crowd erupted. It wasn't as busy as it was for Governor Kevin Stitt whenever he was here. It was later into the night. People were still filing in. But, Markwayne Mullin's race was called relatively early, so people were still showing up around then. But it was a great reaction.
Well, Dakota, this is our last time that we have you here tonight, so if you have any final words, any final takeaways, please share them now.
Yeah, tonight was a very interesting thing. You know, as I mentioned earlier, the polls were showing a different thing for the governor's race, and Markwayne Mullin, Cherokee citizen, also was found to be the elected senator really relatively early. So it was definitely interesting, and it was something interesting to look at.
Well, Dakota, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Markwayne Mullin, a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, has been serving in the U.S. House. Tonight, he became the first Native American in the Senate since Colorado's Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who served from 1993 to 2005.
Markwayne Mullin is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation from eastern Oklahoma. He is running for a new seat to represent the state as one of its 2 senators in the U.S. Congress. Mullin is already a member of Congress, currently serving Oklahoma's District 2 in the United States House. He represents 26 of Oklahoma's 77 counties, most of which are inside Indian reservations. ICT reached out to Mullin's campaign for an interview, but were told his schedule was full. Mullin, who is endorsed by former President Donald Trump, told ICT in an interview from January 2021 that he has developed great relationships with not only Oklahoma tribes, but also tribes elsewhere.
And I've developed some really good friends, lifelong friends, and Navajo Nation, and in some case, I feel like they think I represent them, which I do. I mean, I never cast a vote just for a District 2 of Oklahoma. We're casting a vote that affects the entire nation, right? And I've heard a lot from individuals out in Arizona and actually New Mexico too, and every time, you know, they're voicing their opinion, but they're also voicing their concerns.
Mullin was able to run for this office after longtime Senator Jim Inhofe decided to step away from the office he held for almost 20 years. During Mullin's time in office as representative, he has served on around 35 caucuses, including the Native American caucus, where he served as vice chair. Issues like the McGirt v. Oklahoma Supreme Court case that has shifted Oklahoma and tribal nations surrounding jurisdiction isn't being pushed away from Mullin. Instead, tribal government leaders like Muskogee Nation Principal Chief David Hill and Cherokee Nation Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. and others have said they are confident in Mullin working to protect tribal sovereignty and willing to resolve any issues that may come because of the ruling. Reporting in Oklahoma, Dakota McDowell-Wapakichi, ICT News.
We're nearing the end of our second hour of our 2022 Native Election Night Live. We're now joined by our 2 political commentators. Holly Cook-Macaro is a political consultant and public policy professional, and Mike Stopp is a Republican political consultant and former chief of staff to U.S. Representative Markwayne Mullin. Hello to both of you.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark. It's great to see you.
This is not the big decisive night that everyone thought. Both sides were thinking there was going to be a washout on one side or the other. But right now, the latest I saw is the Senate looks tied 46-46 with a few races still that could go either way. And it's going to be close no matter what. And we'll start with the Republican side.
Well, it's not over. We'll start there. And on the Senate side, we were already looking at something tight. I've heard all kinds of projections from different folks. But the most realistic one I think I heard was 52 with the Republican side. Maybe 51. We see what happened in Georgia. I think the projections down there that if Governor Kemp won re-election by more than 6%, we'd probably see a win from Herschel Walker. I think we saw it at 8%, and Herschel Walker is basically still in a tie. So if that's the case, we're going to go to a runoff, and we won't know what happens in Georgia until January probably, which is going to be a challenge for the Senate and, you know, what it means for us to lead, for the Republicans to lead going forward. But I think we'll probably have a pretty good idea of what that is tonight.
And Holly?
I think the trends that we're seeing are really kind of what we could expect going in. It's going to be a tough night for Democrats. We are seeing the House already leaning towards the Republican control that we all expect. It just in terms of what those numbers are. Although I do want to add that there's always a whole lot of heartache about, oh my gosh, the party in control of the White House is going to lose seats in the midterm. It happens every midterm, yet there's always a whole lot of heartache about it. So in terms of the size of that bloodbath, I don't think we're going to see what we saw with Obama in the 40 to 60 range and the exception to that was Bush too, and but we were at war then, and so coming off of that, these trends are in line with what we expect to see in the midterms, with the party in the control of the White House losing seats in the Congress. What remains to be seen is what the Senate is going to look like, as Mike just said.
I think there and the governors as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you talk about trends, there are some big issues on the ballot, and not just candidates. But the candidates obviously play a role. We're going to see that. You see that in Georgia. You saw it in Oklahoma with the governor's races, I think, as you're about to mention. But, you've got decisions by the Supreme Court that are affecting people. You've got decisions from the White House that are affecting people. And then we're basically having legislative races to determine how those issues are actually going to play out in legislation and federal policy. I don't know at what point we're going to get into these things like the abortion question, Indian country, or some of the other SCOTUS decisions. But I will say one of the trends that I've seen tonight that kind of bothers me is that we have Native candidates on both sides of the aisle, but the questions in those races, to me, have not been Native issues. They've been national issues with Native candidates talking about those national issues versus us really talking about what's going on in Indian country. I would hope as we continue to grow the number of Native candidates on both sides that we'd start talking about more Native specific issues going forward. That's what I would like to see. But Markwayne talks about it a little bit. We saw what happened with Governor Stitt in Oklahoma specifically with the tribes going against him. But it goes back to the issues, the national issues, and not necessarily the Native issues.
About that, Holly, should we have more discussion on the Native issues?
Absolutely. I do think that the districts that we see these candidates running in, though, they're not necessarily reservation-based, right? Our Native candidates are winning in areas that they have to be really leading with some of the issues and really reflect the nature of their constituencies. So we just saw a terrific victory tonight with Congresswoman Sharice Davids, one of the most closely watched races throughout the summer, leading into the fall. Both she and Mary Peltola were the only two Democratic races that were pulling away in the right direction in the last couple of weeks, as noted by the venerable Charlie Cook, the political report. Well, it was actually Amy Wasson, but so we do need to see those Native issues discussed, but I think we have to continue to bring them to the table because our elected officials, the Native candidates that are winning, they are representing their districts and doing it well.
Well, and that's really remarkable because there are so many on both sides, and unfortunately we're going to have to pause right there. Thank you. We'll be back with more from our commentators at the end of next hour. Stay tuned. You're watching Native Vote 2022 Election Night Live.
A hard-fought right. It hasn't always been valued, and we didn't choose this system of government. But our vote creates power in Indian country. It's one way we care for our elders, defend Indigenous women and girls, protect tribal sovereignty, and fight to improve our mental health. More information about voting is available at nativesvote2022.com. Brought to you by Native Public Media and Natives Vote.
And viewers like you.
FNX news, content, programs, and more are on the web at fnx.org. Access content on the go through a phone, tablet, laptop, or on a smart TV. And thank you for watching FNX on this, your local station. FNX.org. See you soon.
Yep.
From the studios of FNX First Nations Experience, welcome to the third hour of Native Vote 2022 Election Night Live. Good evening. I'm Mark Trahant from ICT.
And I'm Aliyah Chavez, the anchor of the ICT newscast.
There are many ways to communicate the news. And in this election cycle, we saw more and more discourse on platforms like TikTok.
I spoke to a few content creators recently who are leading the way.
Hey, I'm Representative Christina Haswood and wanted to show you a little bit of part about being a representative.
A day in the life. Those are the kind of videos Kansas State Representative Christina Haswood makes.
Cool. You don't typically tell a politician, I saw you on TikTok. Normally it's like, I saw you on TV or in the newspaper.
This 28-year-old is different. When Haswood isn't crafting legislation, casting votes, or knocking on people's doors, she is showing people what it's like to be a state lawmaker.
I would say I get a lot of great positivity and a lot of folks who comment, I'm so glad to have come across your TikTok. I live out in Western Kansas, or I live out in another state that we don't get this type of representation at politics at our level.
Haswood has over 100,000 followers on her TikTok page. She says she hopes to bring more transparency to politics and that her videos encourage more young people to run for office. Scroll further down the app and you might stumble into TikTok videos from another Indigenous content creator.
And I'm so honored to be on Ian Dawn's rapid fire segment.
What is the best way to eat fry bread?
You roll it up like a burrito and munch it.
Ian Dawn is a student at the University of Southern California. He has become a well-known figure in his community on the Navajo Nation, all for his TikTok videos on covering the election. It all started for Ian after watching a live stream of a presidential forum earlier this year.
After hearing some of the responses, I thought it was a little bit humorous, and I needed to just voice my first initial opinions and reactions to the candidates.
Ian's videos were viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Over the election cycle, some of his content has been lighthearted. He has interviewed candidates themselves, but he has also asked serious questions about COVID-19 and missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. All of this was front and center for Ian when he went to vote at his nation's chapter house.
A lot of people, to my surprise, came up to me and were like, oh, I've seen your videos, I've seen you on TikTok, you're the reason why I actually knew there was an election today. I'm here because of the videos you make. I made my decision based off of like the things that you shared on your TikTok. And
Ian says engagement like this is what he is most proud of. He hopes that across Indian country, people are voting, participating, and creating content about topics their communities care about. In Phoenix, Arizona, Aliyah Chavez.
Now let's head to Missoula, Montana, where Colby Kicking Women joins us via Skype at State Senator Shane Mourgeau's watch party.
Hey, Mark.
Ronchetti conceded.
I'm here with incumbent State Senator Shane Mourgeau. Unfortunately, there's been a delay in the reporting of the numbers out of Missoula County. But leading into tonight, Shane, how did you feel about your re-election chances?
Yeah, I mean, I feel really good. We put a lot of effort into my race. We had canvassers out. We did op-eds. We really hit it hard with the doors and getting signs out and really connecting with our community. Over the last 2 years, I've been really active in our community, doing rallies and presentations all across the county. So, we felt really good about going into tonight. I felt really good about all the support and donations that came in. It's just unfortunate that we have that delay and the votes coming in, but I think tonight will end up being a good night for us.
Yeah, there's a sizable urban Native community here in Missoula. Reaching out to them, what were some of the issues that they talked to you about and some of the issues you campaigned on?
Yeah, education's a big one always, affordable housing. People are feeling the squeeze with the economy right now, being able to afford, things like just getting gas to get their kids to school. So, had a lot of conversations with folks about, trying to find ways where Montana can do better in structuring a tax system that works for everybody across Montana, where people have affordable health care and good quality education for their kids. hear a lot from unions and people really caring about like what the future of jobs looks like and protecting people's needs and for their families' needs across the state of Montana. So, we work really hard to connect with voters to find out what they really need day to day. And I think we heard that. And I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity to get back to Helena to serve my constituents in that capacity.
Yeah, and if you do win re-election, can you talk about the working dynamics of the American Indian Caucus in the state legislature and what it means to you to work with, other Native legislators from across the state?
Yeah, it's really important to have that representation in Montana. We work a lot on, Montana's Constitution has a mandate in it that we protect the cultural integrity of Montana Indians. Our delegations work really hard to create programs that support language, that promote Indian country economic development, that promote education, the great equalizer for our kids that go to schools all across the state. More Indians live in our urban communities across the state. Missoula is no exception. We have a high percentage of natives in my district and across Missoula. So, we hear a lot of the same concerns from my constituents, from Indian country and from whatever, ethnic background you are. People are really feeling the squeeze of our economy and we realize that, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of division in Montana and across the country. That's something that I feel I do good. I'm very good at is bringing people together and getting to Helena and getting stuff done.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Colby.
Let's jump over to New Mexico, where Sean Griswold joins us from Albuquerque via Skype. Hi again, Sean.
Hey, I'm doing excellent, actually. We just are getting ready to hear from Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. She has just taken the stage. Moments ago, her opponent, Mark Ronchetti, Republican Mark Ronchetti, gave a concession speech, giving the victory to Michelle Lujan Grisham, and she's taking the stage right now to cheers from the Democratic Party to announce her victory. We might be able to listen here for a second here if you can.
Potentially marginalized populations and for women.
As you can tell, they're already ready to celebrate here. Lujan Grisham is about ready to declare some victory in this speech. She came out early, winning heavy among Native American populations. This is going to be celebrated among the indigenous nations that supported her, including the Navajo Nation presidential candidates that did endorse Lujan Grisham. Pueblo governors as well came out in support and are excited to work with Lujan Grisham on further government-to-government relationships for the 23 tribes here in New Mexico. And with this governor who has proven and shown and declared and committed to working with tribal nations on the issues that matter related to education, water, and overall investment for not only the tribal nations from the state, but also investments that's going to support urban Native Americans. You can hear the crowd is coming in a little bit now. She's a moments away from about to declaring victory in this governor's race.
Sean, for our viewers who aren't aware, maybe tell us about some of the accomplishments that Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has achieved for Native communities specifically.
One specifically that she does work on is just the regular communication. Tribal nations say that they do not know who their representatives are speaking to them. They call them, they don't know what's going on. They say this office actually listens to them when it comes to issues related to education, when it comes to issues related to water, when it comes to issues related to child welfare. And there's still some contention here, particularly when it comes to education reform. But they say that she is the candidate and she is the governor that they would like to work with when it comes to a government-to-government relationship.
Sean, do we have any updates yet on Representative Yvette Harrell running for Congress there in New Mexico?
At this point, I have not seen any significant updates here. At this moment, we're still waiting for a lot of the results to come in from Doña Ana County, Southern New Mexico district that is a substantial voting block for her. But at this time, we're still seeing a very close race. And while most of New Mexico's races are going towards Democrats, the race for CD2 with Yvette Harrell is going to be something that we're probably going to be watching early into tomorrow morning.
And Sean, let's talk about some candidates running for the New Mexico State Legislature. I know there was a number of folks running for re-election and also some hoping to be elected for the first time. Do you have any updates from those races?
Yes, so I can say that Sandia Pueblo member Derek Lente has won re-election and will be serving another term in the New Mexico House of Representatives. What's significant for that is that Constitutional Amendment 1 passed here in New Mexico as well with 70% of the vote. This is an effort that's going to provide more than $250 million for education initiatives and predominant tribal education initiatives. And Representative Derek Lente is somebody who's going to be a spearheaded legislative champion to ensuring that education reform is needed and necessary for Native students here in New Mexico. So he'll be back in his seat in Santa Fe in the next year.
Well, Sean Griswold from Source, New Mexico, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's stay in the Southwest, where the Navajo Nation is electing a new president tonight. Incumbent Jonathan Nez and newcomer Boo Van Nygren are the names on the ballot this year. Here's ICT's Polly Dunetclaw with the story.
And Nygren fought their way to the general election. Nez, a career politician, is leveraging his experience and network.
As you go out through your career, you build a network. And being in public service to close to 20 years, from being a chapter vice president to a council delegate to a county board of supervisor to a vice president and now president, we've developed a network.
He is working to secure his second term as the Navajo Nation president. He served one term as vice president before taking over his current position. Nez spent the majority of his term leading his nation through the COVID-19 pandemic. As the pandemic has slowed, Nez is shifting his focus. This election season, he is campaigning on building infrastructure, from roads to water systems, building out electricity and broadband. He says, make this a reality and economic development will follow.
People don't understand that you need the water and the electricity to create economic development. That's the foundation.
Nez did not choose to pursue another term with his current vice president, Myron Lizer. This year, Nez has chosen veteran and attorney Chad Abeda as his running mate. On the other side of the ticket is Boo Van Nygren. He says he wants to see Navajo systems modernized to streamline the government. That includes from getting a business license to home site leases.
One of the things I want to do as your next president is to really revamp the information technology of the Navajo Nation and the processes, procedures, and just to make it more efficient.
In the primary election, Nygren was the youngest presidential candidate. The 35-year-old is a political newcomer. In 2018, he made an unsuccessful run as a vice presidential candidate. Nygren has a decade of managerial experience with a doctoral degree in organizational change and leadership. Part of that experience includes working for a Navajo enterprise. Nygren says he is also committed to working with the nation's council to get his initiatives created and funded.
I think that a lot of us are just tired of the same rhetoric, same politicians, just occupying space, and I think that's a turning point for the Navajo Nation. So it's just a plus that I'm a young candidate, fired up.
If Nygren gets elected, the nation could make history because of his running mate. Rochelle Montoya, a Navajo governance official, would become the first woman ever elected to the executive slate. Polly Dunetclaw, ICT News.
Joining us now is Krista Allen, who is the editor of the Navajo Times, to tell us more about this year's election. Krista is joining us for Skype. Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
What do we know so far from Navajo Nation?
Well, right now, Boo Nygren is in the lead. I am about to head over to the watch party at the Navajo Nation Fairgrounds, where both candidates are awaiting results. So I'm just refreshing my page here, and it's pretty intense and exciting. I'm hearing from my reporters and editors out there that are covering the news how packed Nygren's campaign is right now.
He really reached out to young people in a way that you don't normally see in campaigns. Whether that's effective all the way through, it's certainly changed the nature of the conversation.
It really has. He has been attracting the younger generation for sure. I'm seeing today out there that a lot of the older generation, the older people of the Navajo Nation, are more for our sitting president. So That's what I'm seeing out there, as well as Nigrin. He's attracting more of the younger generation, as you said.
How much more is there required to count ballots? How close to the end of the process, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Right. It's currently 84 chapters of 110 chapters. So it's getting very close. So we should know the full results, I would say around midnight.
Navajo Nation voters are also really important to Arizona politics. And when you see things come in from Maricopa County and some of the others, they think the election's over, and all of a sudden the Navajo votes start coming in. Do you expect more of that tonight?
I'm expecting yes. Like I said, we're just getting results. I have reporters out there, so hopefully we get the results, I would say, by 1 a.m.
Was there a pretty high turnout?
Yes, it has been. I'm seeing a lot of voters out there, especially first-time voters. I think it's very important to see that in our nation now.
Well, Krista Allen, editor of Navajo Times, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's head next to Minnesota to check in with
Shirley Snavy.
Who's at the Tim Waltz and Peggy Flanagan campaign. Hi, Shirley.
Hi there. Peggy Flanagan just got done with her acceptance speech. And as you can tell, the room is full of excitement. And Governor Walz is going to be talking here pretty soon. And as you know, an hour ago, we were live when we found out that they won the election.
They pretty much led throughout the polls. And there was a lot of undercurrents that said, oh, no, don't believe the polls. But the polls were pretty right.
However, it did get pretty close, and I think a lot of it had to do with the economy and the fact that it's been a few months since Roe versus Wade, because that carried a lot in this state, because this state is very much a pro-choice state. So those things together with, I think, the 11 tribes in the state of Minnesota really had a lot to do with putting them over the line.
Were there other issues that, or other candidates that kind of popped up in Minnesota?
There's still a lot of races that haven't been called yet. However, Ilhan Omar has won handily a re-election. The crowd is really fired up. It's great.
What about in the state legislature? Do we know about any of those races?
That it's still pretty close. We haven't had many more called, and Keith Ellison's race is too close to call right now. So it's pretty close. You know, the opponents on this we had a Minnesota Viking running against Peggy Flanagan as lieutenant governor, and it got kind of nasty. A lot of that stuff didn't sit well with voters, and I think the fact that the Walz-Flanagan campaign kept it so positive was something that was really helpful for them.
There must be a lot of people there.
It's pretty packed.
Is there an Indian caucus?
No, you know what? I don't see very many Native Americans here. As a matter of fact, I've only seen a handful. Actually, we ran into a woman that's working on the campaign that is from Cheyenne River, but she grew up with Osage parents, and we talked about the pending Indian Child Welfare Act that's going to be talked about tomorrow in the Supreme Court. And that's something that she cares very deeply for.
Very important. Well, Shirley, thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's wonderful to be here and very exciting.
Let's go to another check-in with ICT's Patty Thalahongba, who is at State Assembly Member James Ramos's watch party. Hi there, Patty. We understand you have some results for us.
We do, Aliyah. So at 8:30 tonight, California released the first ballot count, and these are mail-in ballots, and James Ramos has declared victory with 15,320 votes to his opponent, Joe Martinez, who has so far 7,739 votes. And that's 66% of the vote compared to 33% for Joe Martinez. And so we've got the assemblyman here. He's going to join us in just a second here and talk about his victory. After he declared victory, they had a group of men from
He
his
seems to
tribe,
be right next to you here, Patty.
They started singing bird songs, and so that was really nice cultural part. Congratulations, Assemblyman James Ramos. Looks like you're headed back for a third term.
Thank you so much. And really, the people of the 45th Assembly District overwhelmingly voted for me to represent them in the state legislature as their 45th District Assembly member.
And results are, with the 8:30 vote tally now, how wide of a margin do you expect with the next results?
I'm not sure how the next results will go, but at 66% and my opponent at 33%, that's a large enough margin to claim victory.
Well, afterwards, you some of the other men from your tribe, and you started singing bird songs. Culture is a big part of your campaign, and obviously your life.
Culture is very much a big part of my life. I've learned Cahuilla bird songs from Mr. Robert Levi, and Serrano bighorn sheep songs from Elder Ernest Siva on Serrano. But culture is really who we are as Indian people. We continue to look at the issues in Indian country. I get elected as the assembly member for my district here in San Bernardino County. But part of that also is touching and working on the bills that affect tribal communities that have plagued our people for many years. I'm a firm believer that when we lobbied for the compacts for gaming, that getting those compacts was just an opportunity to open up that window to start to address the issues that truly impact California's First People. And my pieces of legislation start to move in that direction. And you see with so much support from tribal chairs here in San Bernardino County and the state of California, from Wilton Rancheria and Saboba, and our own vice chair being here, shows that Indian country is ready to get engaged in the political system. We can't be the first and only California Indian elected. We need others to start to run for office to make sure that we get at least a handful of California Indian people elected before our term is up.
So looking at your third term, what are some of the issues that you want to address that perhaps will expand on issues you've addressed in the past?
So issues that specifically to Indian country, we're going to continue to advocate on the MMIW issues that are there. We've gotten money to the Attorney General's office to collect data on why some crimes are not being investigated, are being brought to some resolve. We also now have Feather Alert, where an alert system will go out. Now we're talking with tribal leaders about looking at the policing and how the different data is being shared with tribal governments and local jurisdictions. We're trying to get more proactive of making sure that our loved ones get home safe and sound, rather than trying to encourage law enforcement to investigate a homicide. We want to be more proactive.
What about education? You've had some bills regarding education, the removal of the name from California's law school, but in terms of educational programs for youth, do you have anything like that in this next term?
So we did move forward on AB 1936 that removed the name of the founder of a college of the law school in San Francisco because of the atrocities that he funded militias to go out there and shoot and kill Indian people here in the state of California, specifically Round Valley and the Yuki Indian people. And so that name will no longer bear that founder's name that perpetrated those acts. Now, AB 1703 moves forward in starting to get curriculum that's now embedded to teach about California's First People, the atrocities, the history, the colonizational period between the Spanish missionaries to how things move forward and how the animosity moved towards Indian people. That's the start. I mirrored this bill just like the one from Washington State called the Time Immemorial Bill, and it took them 15 years to get it in the curriculum. I think California can move quicker than that. But we need the tribes and others coming together to start to engage to create these task force with the local Aliyahs, with the local school districts. Where you just heard the superintendent of county schools here in San Bernardino County is all open to this.
Well, Patty, thank you so very much for all of your reporting tonight. Of course, Patty Thalahongva is there at the Yamava Resort and Casino in San Bernardino, and we appreciate her reporting so much.
Native people are making their voices heard at the polls tonight. To bring you a brief look into the concerns of Indigenous voters, ICT's Pacey Smith Garcia produced this story with the help of some of our correspondents around the country.
From Anchorage, Alaska to Rapid City, South Dakota, Native voters showed up at the polls on Tuesday. ICT's reporters and producers interviewed Native folks to see what they looked for in candidates and platforms.
Local and state, I think it's important to look into the women's rights and also marijuana.
Definitely fish and protecting our resources and using our resources to better our economy.
On a local level, it's more of how we can better our communities back at home. It's more how we can make something more better for a better platform for our next generation to come up, so that all the obstacles and hoops that we went through, they don't have to go through that.
Two of the most important issues to me are probably healthcare and education. I know that that's really important to my family and the work that we do in our day-to-day. So.
The people we spoke to expressed concerns about access to voting. It's an issue that seems to be common across Native communities.
I haven't been able to afford my own location, so now I had to resort to getting a post office to just be able to vote, which costs a lot of money. But right now, hopping from house to house, extended stay, and just it's a big old mess. So
many people just don't like the process of voting because it's such a long time, and many of them don't take it too seriously.
Especially me, for a long time, I didn't feel like our voice mattered. I didn't feel like our vote mattered.
Despite the challenges, these voters also said they saw an increase in wanting to combat voting restrictions.
You got this Black Hills Powell, they had booths there that would allow you to vote too. There's accessible ways to become a registered voter in your respected community. It's just based off of if you feel your voice matters.
Here in Washington State, after we register, we are sent mail-in ballots, and so that is something that we can do pretty easily.
In Phoenix, Arizona, Pacey Smith Garcia, ICT News.
And we'll be right back with more from Native Vote 2022 Election Night Live.
Tonight's broadcast is supported in part by...
Our vote is a hard-fought right. It hasn't always been valued, and we didn't choose this system of government. But our vote creates power in Indian country. It's one way we care for our elders, defend Indigenous women and girls, protect tribal sovereignty, and fight to improve our mental health. More information about voting is available at nativesvote2022.com. Brought to you by Native Public Media and Natives Vote.
And viewers like you.
FNX news, content, programs, and more are on the web at fnx.org. Access content on the go through a phone, tablet, laptop, or on a smart TV. And thank you for watching FNX on this, your local station. FNX.org. See you soon.
Welcome back to 2022 Native Vote Election Night Live.
Alaska made history when Mary Peltola was elected to Congress. ICT's Mackenzie Allen Charmley has this profile.
Representative Mary Peltola became the first Alaska Native in Congress and the first woman to represent Alaska in the House of Representatives after winning a special election earlier this year. The death of Representative Don Young, who had served as Alaska's sole member of Congress for 49 years, triggered the special election. Many expected a Republican to win the seat, and there were two of them in the running. Peltola, a Democrat, still came out ahead in Alaska's first ranked choice election. For her, finding out she won on August 31st was a surprising way to spend her 49th birthday.
A lot of rejoicing that we were able to pull it off, because I was definitely the underdog. I had only raised $400,000 for that race, and I was outspent 8-1. Just incredible odds.
Peltola says her purpose is simple. She strives to be a representative for all of Alaska and to continue the legacy of the late Congressman Don Young. Jenny Marie Stryker, political director for the Alaska Center for Democracy, spoke highly of Peltola's leadership during the Alaska Federation of Natives Convention in Anchorage last month.
She is clearly demonstrating that she is an absolute doer in that office. She's not just there to hold and talk, but she's there to pass legislation and see what we need.
The decision to endorse Peltola was unanimous, says Stryker.
We are long overdue on Alaska Native representation in Congress, and not just in Congress, but on every single level of government, and this is one of them.
At the annual AFN convention, Peltola spoke of statewide unity, continuing her advocacy for fish and other crucial issues important to Alaskans.
Every Alaskan household wants the same things. We want good schools for our children. We want safe homes for our families. We want livable wages.
Peltola is on the ballot in November, seeking a full 2-year term, facing off against former Governor Sarah Palin, Republican Nick Begich, and Libertarian Chris Bai. And despite the result, she's excited for Alaska's future.
No matter who gets elected in our state, we're going to move forward. We're going to work together. We're going to build bridges, and we're going to overcome our challenges.
For ICT News, Mackenzie Allen Charmley.
Let's actually head to Anchorage, Alaska right now via Skype, where ICT's Jocelyn Estes is at Representative Peltola's election watch party. Hi, Jocelyn. Hi there, Jocelyn. Can you hear us?
So I'm here at the 49th state brewery, and as you can see, it's filled up. There's probably a couple of hundred people here. And the crowd is
Unfortunately, Jocelyn, we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. I'm not sure if there's something that you can do there with your audio. Hopefully we can get you back there. We should note that, as Mackenzie Allen Charmley just mentioned, Mary Peltola was recently elected to Congress in a special election to fill the remainder of former Congressman Don Young's term. Let's try Jocelyn again here. Jocelyn, can you hear us on your end?
You're on.
Hi there, Jocelyn. Can you hear us?
You're on.
Hi, this is Jocelyn Estes with ICT News here in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm at the 49th state brewery.
I'm so sorry, Jocelyn. Unfortunately, we can't hear you very well over here on our end. But I mean, Marka, we've had a very exciting night tonight.
Yeah, in fact, one of the interesting things so far is the role of redistricting. In Sharice David's district in Kansas, the redistricting was designed to get her out, and she had 65% of the votes, so it didn't work. And on the flip side, Yvette Harrell, which we said at the beginning of the show, Yvette Harrell is a 50-50 split, and that's with 90% of the votes counted. So it's really remarkable, the role of redistricting. Now we're going to Washington, where former State Senator Claudia Kaufman is seeking a return to office. She joins us from Kent, Washington via Skype. Hi, Claudia.
Let's take your
Can you hear me, Claudia?
What's going on?
I guess this is our night for technical difficulties. Can you hear me, Senator Kaufman?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us what you're seeing in Washington tonight. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, unfortunately, as you just mentioned, Mark, it seems like we're having many technical issues tonight.
Right.
But regardless, I think the conversation here has been really full. As we mentioned before, I mean, redistricting seems to be a major theme this year, but I'm also seeing a lot of what we predicted in terms of the House moving towards Republicans.
Slightly. I mean, there was chances that it could have been what people were determining as a red wave, and that's clearly not going to happen. It's going to be a few seats one way or the other. In the Senate, we're now really talking about 3 seats difference. And those 3 seats could be Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. I want to give some updates here because we recently learned that Charles Graham in North Carolina has lost his election to Congress, so he will not be going to Congress. He was hoping to be elected for a first time. I also saw that Lynette Grable, who is a Democrat and was hoping to be elected to Congress in Wyoming, has also lost her election. So we're seeing 2 candidates there who, unfortunately, this is the end of the road for them in this midterm.
Lynette's run a second time, which is always that stick-to-itness you like to see. That's really interesting district because that was Representative Lynn Cheney's district. And she lost to Harriet Harriman and the Republicans. It's a very Republican state, so it's not a surprise that she lost.
Let's actually recap the Native candidates who did win tonight. We saw Markwayne Mullin, of course, being elected to the U.S. Senate, the first senator-elect since Ben Nighthorse Campbell in 2005. We saw Tom Cole was reelected, and there was some other folks in Kansas. Maybe tell us about that.
Representative Sharice Davids would be the headliner in Kansas. And in fact, it's the person who designed the redistricting basically said that she wanted to make sure that no Democrats were elected from Kansas. And when you look at the map of Kansas, it's a big red state with a big blue mark. And that blue mark is Sharice Davids.
Absolutely. The other victory we saw tonight was in Minnesota with Governor Tim Walz and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. They've clinched another term in office there. We still have yet to hear, of course, from Yvette Harrell. And the other candidate that we are still waiting to hear about is Mercedes Krause in Nevada. Now, we were really, really watching that race because we predicted that the Native vote in Nevada could be a game changer in that race.
Well, Nevada is one where we're just not seeing a lot of numbers yet. So, yeah, it absolutely will be something to watch going forward.
Definitely.
Let's head to Maricopa County in Arizona, where the PBS NewsHour's Stephanie Tsai is standing by on Skype.
Hey, Mark. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
I'm trying to center myself a little bit better in your 2-box here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're at the tabulation center at the Maricopa County Elections Office. I don't know if you all have been reporting on the early results, but we do see results trickling in. The first tranche of results were all the early ballot returns that came by last Friday, and out of those 842,000 ballots, not surprisingly, we saw Democrats take the lead in all the top ticket races. What might be worth mentioning is the degree of those leads, double-digit leads for all of the 3 major races we're watching: the governor's race, the Secretary of State race, and then the federal race, the Senate race, a key Senate seat. We do see Democrats with early leads there. But, you know, I think there are a couple factors we're watching there. First of all, Republicans Republicans usually turn out in big numbers on election day, but in this election in particular, you had GOP candidates that were urging Republicans to wait to vote until election day, and those ballot returns we don't have yet. They will be trickling in throughout the night, but we don't expect to be declaring any winners, obviously, before the end of the evening.
I understand there was a whole problem with machines, and that's causing new conspiracy theories to fly around.
Yeah, so 20% of the tabulation machines at a certain point today in Maricopa County were not functioning properly. They were basically spitting ballots back out. Now, late in the afternoon, Maricopa County officials realized that it was a printer setting that was off, that it wasn't dark enough for the tabulation machines to read. So what did that mean? Factually, what that meant is that voters would take their already filled out ballot and either put it in a ballot box, a secure ballot box that would then be transported here to the tabulation center by a bipartisan team of poll observers, and it would be tabulated here later in the evening or tomorrow, or they could go to another voting center and try again. It did not mean that votes were not counted, but as you point out, Mark, the problem here is that there is a concerted effort on social media, especially by far-right influencers, to use these problems with tabulation to somehow say that something nefarious happened. And so we saw, former President Trump suggest that only conservative voter areas had been affected, which is just patently untrue. For example, we were at a downtown Phoenix polling location where they had earlier experienced problems with tabulation machines, and downtown Phoenix is a Democratic stronghold, not just a conservative area. We heard that echoed by the gubernatorial candidate, Kari Lake. So this is something we're definitely going to be watching in coming days. The acceleration and virality of those tweets, because if they continue to morph into the types of full-on conspiracy theories that we saw in 2020, then we will potentially see the fallout from that. And in many ways, Arizona has just seen a continuation of the 2020 election because Stop the Steal really started here.
Well, and in fact, candidate Kari Lake actually used that material saying, I have lawyers ready and we're going to continue this election fight no matter what happens tonight.
Yeah, and she's been litigious throughout this campaign. As you know, a few months ago, she sued Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, who is her opponent in the governor's race, demanding a full hand count of ballots. That case was thrown out and is under appeal. And then we saw today, as a result of the tabulation issues, her lawyers, as well as other GOP lawyers representing Senate candidate Blake Masters, filed an emergency motion late in the day to ask a municipal judge to basically extend Maricopa County's voting hours by 3 hours. So not only is that probably not feasible at 5 p.m. in the afternoon here, but the judge actually ruled that there was no evidence to suggest that these issues with the tabulation amounted to any voter losing their right to vote, and we haven't heard of anyone being disenfranchised. Certainly the Republicans have a point that more Republicans tend to turn out on election day to vote. So any delay, any potential problems they feel could have affected them more. And that point may be more fair, but there are there's a lot of misinformation, even from elected Arizona representatives out there saying that these ballots were somehow provisional. They're not provisional. Those ballots will be counted as though those voters voted in person and that the ballots were counted there. So again, there's a lot of misinformation.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Mark.
See you. Let's head back to North Dakota, where Jody Rave's Spotted Bear is attending a state house watch party in Mandan Hidatsa and Arikara Nation. Hello again, Jody.
Hi, Mark.
So what is our final look at the picture there tonight?
It's been a very interesting race here in North Dakota. We had about 5 or 6 natives running for the state legislature, and we only have 2 natives now that are going to be representing us, and that is the 2 people that were elected tonight was Jamie Davis in the Turtle Mountain District and Lisa DeVille. And interestingly enough, these are both new sub-districts that were just created as a part of the new decennial redistricting process. But, overall, Ruth Buffalo will not be representing us in the legislature. Richard Marcellet was voted out tonight. So it's quite a turn of events with tonight's election.
Well, thank you, Jordy.
Yep, thank you.
That, of course, was Jody Spotted Bear in North Dakota. Let's check in with FNX's Sahar Kajanori at the Pechanga Resort and Casino, where the tribe is holding its election watch party. Sahar joins us via Skype. Hi, Sahar.
Welcome back, everybody. So we are here at the Pechanga Resort Casino, and this has been incredibly exciting. I wish you had all been here to hear the applause when they had made the unofficial announcement. But with me, I have Tribal Chairman Mark Macaro. Hi.
Good evening. How are you?
Oh my goodness, this was really fun and exciting to watch. Tell me about the momentum and kind of the experience you've had here.
Well, the experience has been, finally, we get to the end, and it puts the exclamation point at the end of what we were hoping would be the case, that Prop 27 would go down in defeat. Prop 26, unfortunately, is going down in defeat as well. It got lost in the confusion. 2 similar sounding ballot measures ended up confusing a lot of voters. But what's really important here is that we have a huge win in defeating Prop 27. We had outside corporate entities, DraftKings, FanDuel, Rush Street, BetMGM, all these corporate entities who wanted to bring mobile sports betting into California, a state with over 65 tribal gaming facilities, and it would absolutely threaten our brick and mortar casinos, our gaming, and really is a lifeblood to our communities. So the defeat of 27 was absolutely essential. And we couldn't have done it without the support of this large coalition of tribes here in California. Over 60 tribes stood together to defeat Prop 27. So it is a very gratifying win. And by the way, to talk about what the percentages are, right now with about 35% of precincts reporting, we're looking at Prop 27. It's at 16% yes. It's DraftKings, FanDuel, 16% yes, 84% no. So it's a massive loss and a big win for California tribes in protection of our tribal gaming. Prop 26, which was our coalition also trying to bring a retail form of sports betting in, is also losing it, but it's faring better. I mean, it's at 30% yes and 70% no. So where things end up over the course of the night, but it'll probably look a lot like it does right now.
Thank you, Sahar.
Thank you.
The right to vote continues to be an uphill battle for some Indigenous Americans, and increasing voter participation is a challenge both on and off tribal territories. In this story, ICT senior producer Victor Moniz Jr. looked at one strategy that large and small tribes have used to get out the vote.
For many Americans, November 8th is the day to use their voices to elect the people and policies they hope will support their communities. And for some tribal nations, that same day is also when they hold their own elections. The Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation in North Dakota currently has 17,000 citizens. But in their last election for chairman in 2016, only 2,400 people drove back to their territory to cast a ballot. MHA Nation citizen Prairie Rose Seminole is a voting advocate who has also worked on a number of projects to protect Native voting rights. Seminole thinks the reason why her nation votes on the day it does is more about being practical than anything else.
It has become somewhat complicated. I mean, the reality that people are still trying to disenfranchise our vote in non-tribal elections still exists. And for voting at one polling location for a tribal election and then driving to other polling locations for the non-tribal elections can be problematic. And so we want to ensure that our tribal voters have access to, what they need to make sure that they vote that day.
On the other side of things, the Navajo Nation's population soared to the biggest in the country with almost 400,000 citizens. In the 2020 election, Indigenous voters from the nation helped turn the state from red to blue in many races, including president. The Nez Citizen and Navajo County Democrats Executive Director Janie Parrish is working to increase voter registration in tribal communities. Parrish says her leadership understood the voting challenges of its citizens and switched to November 8th to help streamline the process.
There might be some nice conclusions made, but even also convenience, because honestly, the scheduling works out because we get to have our Navajo Nation presidential election councils the same time that we get to have state and federal, which are all critically important offices. And so why not be able to vote for our tribal council delegate, our Navajo president, as well as the state elections and federal elections.
With many obstacles facing Native voters this election season, one thing is for certain. Many will be in line, ready to vote their conscience on November 8th. In Bismarck, North Dakota, Vincent Moniz, ICT News.
We're joined now again by our commentators tonight. We have Democrat Holly Cook-Macaro here and Republican Mike Stopp. It's been quite a night.
Yes, it has. The results coming in are kind of in line with what we expected, but we are still awaiting some of the big ones like Alaska.
Well, while we have everyone here who's watching, of course, tomorrow's going to be a big day, as many people will be watching the Supreme Court, who's hearing a huge case. Mike, let's start with you. First, tell us about the case and kind of what we're expecting to hear from the arguments.
Okay, so the case is about a family out of Texas that went before the Fifth Circuit that basically is questioning the constitutionality of the Indian Child Welfare Act. The two major questions before the court are going to be the Commandeering Act, basically meaning that the federal government is requiring states to do something, which is what we call commandeering and is normally found to be unconstitutional. The other and more serious question is whether or not this particular Indian policy is a question of Native Americans being a political entity, the tribes themselves, or if it's actually a racial entity. And that is where the sticking point really comes with the court and with the decision they're going to make.
Holly, we know that we've heard from experts who have said that if ICWA is overturned, that would be devastating for Native people and for tribal nations, but maybe tell us more about that.
Yes, it's going to be devastating because it hits at the heart of our communities, our children, and the protection of them. But really, this is about more than just the Indian Child Welfare Act. These efforts, and they're backed by some very conservative right-wing think tanks, if you do a little bit of homework and digging, that are really attacking the political, racial classification of tribes and what that foundation means. It's going to have if ICWA is overturned in this case and what it turns on, it's going to have an effect on Indian gaming, on tribal sovereignty, treaty rights across the board. The impacts, the broader impacts of that yet have to be fully analyzed. But we all should be very cautious, wary, afraid even of what is in front of the Supreme Court.
I'm going to push back just a little bit on that, especially when it comes to the conservative argument. We've seen that Justice Gorsuch can give us the conservative argument for the government-to-government relationships between the tribes and the federal government. I disagree with what some of these conservative groups are doing, the Goldwater Institute specifically. But there is a conservative answer to this, and we've seen some devastating things in American history, and some that just recently came up, like what we saw in Canada with the boarding school issues. Family is very important to Native Americans, and our government-to-government relationships are a constitutional right that we have had, built through treaties, built through trust, built through other forms, that there is a conservative argument for, and I hope that the court actually looks at it that way before they decide to take it from a political entity argument to a race-based argument, because that's not who Native Americans are, and that's not been our historical relationship with the federal government.
Well, I want to make sure that we can go to you both. We only have a very short time here left, but Holly, what are your main takeaways from the evening?
I think we've had some significant wins for Indian country so far. Sharice David's race was one of, as I mentioned earlier, just one of the most closely watched. And she, and Mark said it earlier, that redistricting efforts to ensure that she would not be reelected were very public and very active in the Republican-led legislature in the state of Kansas. She worked it, she worked hard in that new district, and she won over the voters. This is the second time. This is her third reelection, right? In a district that she flipped. I think it's a remarkable win, a testament to the work that she's put forward. Peggy Flanagan, another, huge win. What a bright future we have in front of Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. In fact, in so many of our candidates. Really sorry to see Ruth Buffalo lose in the state of North Dakota. I don't think this is the end of the road for her in terms of her political future. This has really been, a ramp for her.
Mike, I'm so sorry, Holly, to cut you off there. We're not going to be able to get to you. Unfortunately, we have to pause the conversation there. I wish we could go all night, but we're going to check in one more time with our numbers correspondent, Mackenzie Allen Charmley.
Hi, Aliyah. There's lots of numbers since the last time we spoke. And just a recap on some of the candidates that you've mentioned. U.S. Representative and Ho-Chunk citizen Sharice Davids has been reelected to Congress in Kansas. According to the AP, this will secure her third term in office. And as you mentioned, Aliyah, Charles Graham, who is Lumbee, lost the race for Congress in North Carolina. He received 42% of the votes. Brian Terry Choctaw in Tennessee is leading the race by 67%, where he is running to be re-elected in the state house. He's been in that office since 2014. Tom Cole, Chickasaw citizen, is securing his 11th term in Congress. He is the longest serving Indigenous member to be in Congress. And as we heard earlier live, Penny Flanagan has won her re-election in Minnesota as Lieutenant Governor, and Republican Harriet Hageman has defeated Lynette Graybull and secured Wyoming's at-large seat for the U.S. House of Representatives. And then taking it to the Navajo Nation, we see candidate Boo Nygren is leading over Jonathan Nez by 28,000 versus Nez's 24,000.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I'm so sorry. We're going to have to pause the conversation there. But for all of you watching at home, you can get all of the latest updates by visiting ictnews.org. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Tonight's broadcast is supported in part by...
Our vote is a hard-fought right. It hasn't always been valued, and we didn't choose this system of government. But our vote creates power in Indian country. It's one way we care for our elders, defend Indigenous women and girls, protect tribal sovereignty, and fight to improve our mental health. More information about voting is available at nativesvote2022.com. Brought to you by Native Public Media and Natives Vote.
And viewers like you.